Okay, why don't we get started with non-agenda testimony. Paula Ingram and Citizen.
Hello, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Paula Ingram, and I work for the Children's Initiative, a local nonprofit child advocacy agency here in San Diego. We work on a number of projects in the county, including after-school programming, juvenile justice, and the San Diego County Report Card on children and families. And lately, we've been working on an attendance improvement project with your district that came out of the data we saw in the report card, which showed us that across the county, 25% of our elementary students are at risk for missing too much school. And research shows that even as early as kindergarten, if you're missing 10% of your school days, you are now at a disadvantage for school achievement and literacy. For the past 3 years, we've been partnering with 8 different school districts to see what the real barriers are that keep kids out of school and what needs to be done to turn the curve. We're very grateful to this board, to Superintendent Bill Koba, for allowing us the privilege of working with Choyes Mead Elementary on this project. We're also very thankful to have had this project guided by the expertise of Becky Philpott, a valued member of the advisory team for our Data to Action project. I'd like to take this opportunity to commend Choyes Mead's principal, Julia Breedy-Friel, for the energy and hard work that she has committed to this project, and most importantly, to helping her students and families understand the importance and benefits of attending school regularly. Now, reversing long-standing social and family patterns of poor attendance is definitely not a task for the faint of heart. It takes perseverance, optimism, and determination. Ms. Breedy-Friel and her staff took this issue on with great spirit and creativity, implementing several best practices to improve attendance at her school. Some small examples would be making attendance a daily focus at Choyes Mead, increasing parent engagement and education about the importance of attendance, and reviewing classroom-level attendance data with her teachers on a weekly basis. Ms. Breedy has truly made it a focus and what I like to call making it part of the DNA of being at Choyes Mead. And her hard work has paid off. Ms. Breedy was able to reduce the number of her at-risk students, at risk by means of their attendance, by 25%. A reduction of that magnitude is outstanding, and it's just not possible without implementing several levels of intervention. Another way of looking at this means that roughly 100 Choyes Mead students have been taken out of a high-risk category and placed on a better school and life trajectory. Ms. Breedy has truly been an inspiring and determined leader for her school and their families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Citizen.
Once again, this year, there are going to be children going on field trips from various schools, 8th grade field trips and various field trips. This year, children will not be going to 6th grade camp. And traditionally, that's been a field trip that every child in the school district could enjoy. And that's not going to happen this year. But children that have means and can afford to go on these other field trips are going to be subsidized by this school district. We're going to be paying substitutes. We're going to be paying teachers to leave town for 5 days to have a good time. I don't think that should be happening. One of the things that disturbs me the most about these field trips is that children that do not have money are excluded. And it happens year after year that I get calls from parents that their child didn't get to participate on the field trip. Now, the schools will tell you that no child was excluded because they didn't have money. But that isn't the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is if you don't have money, don't show up at the school assembly, don't come to the plating meetings because you're not going because you don't have the money. And that does not need to be subsidized by this school district. If kids don't have 6th grade camp this year, then all field trips that require the school district to subsidize them need to be canceled. I really feel that way. They can schedule them in the summertime. They can schedule them over spring break, but there's no reason for this school district to be spending money that it doesn't have on substitute teachers and leaving all the other children behind to have substandard education because their teachers are gone on a field trip that they know about, while they sit there with a substitute that doesn't know what's been going on in the class. And the children are disappointed because their peers that had money got to go to D.C. while they have to sit in class with substitutes.
Okay, I would like to ask the Army JROTC Color Guard from Kearney High to come and present the colors. Please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Great job, Kearney. Okay, at the beginning of the meeting, I'd like to ask us in a minute to observe a moment of silence in honor of one of the great parent volunteers, certainly that I've had a chance to work with, Susana Garcia, who passed away about a month ago. But I wonder, is Susana's husband here? Would you be able to just say a couple of words here to the board? Would you be comfortable doing that? Or if not, that's fine as well. You'd rather just stay, okay. Susana was an incredible parent volunteer, especially with Chavez Elementary School. When Susana's older daughter started at Chavez Elementary, when the school first opened, the school had a great bilingual education program, really the model of what bilingual education needs to be. And unfortunately, with the passage of Proposition 227 at the state level and then the interpretation of Prop 227 from the district, the bilingual program was eliminated for a number of years at Chavez. But Susana never stopped fighting to bring that program back for her younger kids and also for all students, at Chavez Elementary, because she knew the difference that it makes in the lives of students. And really, I can absolutely, assure Susana's family and friends and the people who work so closely with her that, as you know, without her efforts, we would not have the board-approved biliteracy policy in this district. We would not have the board-approved seal of biliteracy. And we wouldn't have the recreation and the rebuilding of a bilingual program at Chavez Elementary. We have all of those things now, and a newfound commitment to bilingual education in this district, largely because of the efforts of one parent who was determined to see that her kids had every opportunity for a great education and a great future. So if we could take a moment and observe a moment of silence in honor of Susana Garcia, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you to Susana's family and friends for being here tonight. Okay, with that, I'd like to welcome everyone present today and those watching the broadcast and call the September 13th, 2011 regular meeting to order with all board members present. If you wish to address the board today and your name is not on the blue sheet located at both entrances to the auditorium, and if you've not already submitted a request for public testimony form, please complete the form and submit it to Ms. Ward. Speakers on agenda items will be called on to speak during the discussion of the agenda item. Once the discussion begins on an item, no additional public speaker requests will be accepted. Non-agenda item testimony was heard at 5 p.m. and will also be heard at the end of the meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask our ASB student representative, Donna Good from Patrick Henry High School, to introduce yourself and tell us what's happening at Patrick Henry.
Hi, I'm Donner Good. I'm the Patrick Henry High School ASB president. As ASB on campus, we're trying to get the students on campus more involved and having a more dominant role in deciding on what happens on campus. So they're the ones who have to attend the school. We believe that their input makes a huge difference. As well, ASB is trying to take on bigger projects and becoming a bigger asset on campus among administration.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Donner. Thanks for being here with us tonight. Okay, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Your information report, Superintendent Kova.
Thank you, President Barrera. I have one personnel assignment to announce. Jennifer Pesavento Conway to Vice Principal at SCPA. Moving on to superintendent comments, it's been a short week since we met last. A couple of key points. We've met with members of the GAIN Commission. That's the mayor's organization that I'm a part of the commission, and to talk about how the district and the commission can work closer together in the coming years, some opportunities for support and intervention. So we had a preliminary meeting this past week on the 8th, and Thursday I'll be going to the full-up commission meeting, and we'll discuss that in the formal setting of the commission. I'll bring that back to the board. I think the big issue of last week was last Thursday afternoon, beyond this time, we had the unprecedented power outage. We had to activate our EOC, Emergency Operations Center. We had it about half-manned. The challenge was communicating and coordinating. Once we lost electricity, and anything powered by electricity, whether it was cell phones, computers, etc., the means of moving information around was significantly reduced. I must give credit to the staff on the campuses and the district police, because many of us still had kids of all ages on our campuses, whether it was in after-school programs, after-school extracurricular activities, athletics, as the case may be. We ensured that all of those facilities were maintained, staffed by adults, until either the bus had completed its delivery of kids to the appropriate site, or parents had in fact come to collect their children. And they were caught, the adults were, with coming to retrieve the kids. But that was successfully completed, and through the evening I went over to the Emergency Operations Center at the county office and had to track what and how we were going to go forward for the following day. And as it turned out, the school closure the following day was needed in order to do any number of things. We had principals, maintenance crews, custodians out there, everything from restoring bells to fire alarms to telephones to actually repairing IT equipment that failed. I think to have had the kids and staff back on Friday morning, it would have been, I think, clearly chaotic. We, at that point, still had 50 schools in water districts that were under a boil water regulation that would have impacted us. So there are many different moving variables that don't come out till the day after to determine what exactly was the impact. impact. And I think today we're still researching some IT equipment and, the temperamental nature of the sudden shutdown, the power surge that impacted that. The other things I'd like to bring up too quickly, I was at the Lincoln Cluster meeting last night. I've asked board's direction and emphasis on cluster governance, moving it forward, everybody synchronized, trying to put out for community and staff consumption all of the cluster meeting calendars for the coming year, or at least what the standard date, time, location will be as they finalize. And we have a good number of them on a Monday, Thursday basis, and with one exception, I think we've avoided Tuesdays, so that if you or I wanted to be there, not to conflict with a board session, that's going to occur. So I was at the cluster gathering for Lincoln last night, and I've asked senior staff and area superintendents to rotate around, because we may find good ideas in one cluster governance meeting that we could share with another one. We could take a pulse of the organization and come back quickly to respond to it. The last thing I want to bring up is I've got another one of these procurement Washington Monument miniatures here today. I'm just amazed at our strategic sourcing group. They've been able to earn any number of recognitions for what they've done to identify efficiencies, to identify new procurement best business practices, and so on and so forth. And in this case here, they've earned something called the Sterling Award, 2011 Universal Public Procurement Certificate Council Sterling Award. And this has to deal with the fact that they've won X number of other recognitions to get to this point to be entitled to this award. So I want to recognize Art Hanby, all of his contracting staff, for what they're doing day in and day out to provide value-added services and material needs to the district. And it's not what I say or what the board says, but these professional institutes have recognized. So I want to thank Art and his team publicly for it. And that concludes my comments today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Superintendent. We'll move on to board information reports. Mr. Barnett.
Well, it was 7:45 on Thursday when I had heard that the superintendent was going to be announcing at 8 that schools would not be open the next day, and I had both my teenage daughters in the house, and we heard radio reports that the lights were coming on in some other parts of the county, so they were very anxious that the superintendent made that announcement
got on the air quickly.
In enough time. Even though this is not a new year for the board, it's a start of a new board. It's a new school year, and it's the first year that I, as a new board member, new school year, have come up across. And I guess a few things I wanted to say. Number one, I don't think any of us up here are happy about the status of the budget, and specifically the number of layoffs that were required in this year's budget, which started July 1. We don't even know the total final what it will be for teachers yet, as we're trying to recall, but it's definitely in several hundred range currently, and then for all the classified staff in the hundreds. And it has had an impact at site levels, and parents have seen it, and there's also a lot of fleshing out that will hopefully happen in the next few weeks. My own daughters are in classes in high school which have well over 45 students per teacher, which is unmanageable clearly, and that's in the higher grades as well. So I think it's disappointing, but I think it's fair to say that this board acted based on all of the available data and information and did the best it could within those circumstances. And hopefully, as we move ahead into the school year, that we can work together cooperatively with all the bargaining units and community members and having a positive discussion of how we're going to continue to solve these problems in the year and years ahead. Thank you.
Jackson.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Dr. Evans.
Yes, I'd just like to say a few words about one of the communities I represent in Claremont. I think there's some really exciting things going on there. One of the things we've been working on the board is making sure that we're working towards a quality school in every neighborhood, which means the teachers, the community, the parents, all working together and getting support from the district. some enhancements. They're really making a difference. Both Claremont High School and Madison High School are celebrating the opening of their brand new football stadiums with turf fields, with stadium Friday night lights, which will really be do a lot for the pride of the community in the schools. And other projects already at Madison and soon at Claremont High, very state-of-the-art, up-to-the-date auto tech centers, a new business center going in at Claremont High, a very impressive video production center at Madison, and Innovation Middle School, which has issued laptop computers to every single student, which they're able to take home and have access to the internet for doing their homework. So there are a lot of exciting things going on, which I think is really going to contribute to a lot more of the elementary students in the Claremont community staying there for middle school and high school. And a lot of this is due to the work of both cluster councils, both the Claremont cluster and in the Madison community of schools, parents, teachers, and other community people who have really come together to advocate for their school. They've actually joined together for a Claremont Mesa Foundation for Education, which is going to raise funds for the entire Claremont and Madison community. So I think it's just really exciting to see that in spite of a lot of the budget difficulties and everything we're facing, that we see a very positive attitude and a community that's really moving forward.
Mr. Beiser.
I just wanted to thank Colonel Bob Dingman up in Scripps Ranch for his help to partner with the new principal at Scripps Ranch High School and Lee Dolgoroff and other members of the staff for solving a parking problem. There are a couple things going on at the high school, and I was really grateful for members of the community working together to solve that problem. The part of the problem is because there is a construction project going on and a solar panel project going on, and that's really great that we're going to be right now we're constructing a new green technology facility which will help the students to learn about the nuts and bolts of solar panels and wind turbines and lots of other opportunities for that to continue that green generation. In Henry High School, I'd like to congratulate Coach Mike Martinez on his successful football team. And I think that's incredible that this individual shows such dedication to our kids at Henry High School. He lost his job. He was laid off. He's a teacher in the Sweetwater School District, but yet he cares so much that he is the current football coach at Henry High School. And he's not only the coach there, but he has helped lead those kids to win their football game. And I won't say which school he beat. He's a teacher at that school. The other thing that I did want to mention is that we have confirmed cluster meetings for Henry High School, September 29th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Henry High School. And at Sarah High School, cluster meeting is confirmed for September 19th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at Farb Middle School. I think we're waiting to hear back from the Scripps Ranch Community Schools cluster to confirm that date and time. One of the things that I did want to mention really quickly was that we have some hot classrooms last week. I received several emails and phone calls from teachers and staff in some of the schools. We had some classrooms 98 degrees last week. Some classrooms in the 90 degrees. We had reports of children not feeling well because of the extreme heat conditions. And I know that the superintendent is addressing this, and I'm also very grateful for the board, my fellow board members last year in their vote to accelerate some air conditioning projects so we can get air conditioning in some of these classrooms sooner. I think it's also really important that we look ahead to the 12-13 budget and we work towards one common goal, and I believe that common goal to make sure that we're providing for a quality education in every community is to have the common goal be zero layoffs next year. How we accomplish that goal is the work of the board and all of the bargaining units and all of the staff and all the faculty and the superintendent. But I have one firm commitment and that is to try to make sure that we maintain the educational programs that we have at this level, and that we're also fighting in this process to protect VAPA, GATE, and class size reduction programs that we fought so hard to protect this current year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bosler. Just very quickly, I'd like to thank Principal Tavaga Bustani and the community at Edison Elementary. I had a chance to be there for their big back-to-school kickoff. Edison, anybody who has a chance to get out and visit Edison or just learn about some of the work that they've done, it just and I think we'll hear about it in the report tonight. Just continues to be the example, not the example, but an incredible example of what students are able to achieve in a school where the entire community is on the same page and believes in kids and believes in what they can do. So again, just congratulations to Edison for another great year. Also thank the San Diego High International Studies community. They had a really nice fundraiser Sunday afternoon. Historian Robert Dallek came out from Washington, D.C. On the invitation of Principal Kirk Ankeny to do a little fundraiser. And, you know, everybody's talking about the impact that we're seeing. Some of the magnet schools and the IB programs have been particularly hard hit. And I hope we can do something about that. But the fact that the school community came together and that Professor Dallek came out to help with a fundraiser was really great. Okay, with that, we'll move on. Oh, can we get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Please vote. Okay. With the consent agenda, we've got some speakers on one item that I'll call up, item E52, the naming of Gompers Field. Cecil Stepp, Lisa Maples, and Gerald Carroll. And we've got some more. Okay.
Mr. President, has that been accepted and finalized? Our field name?
No, we're going to allow you to speak, and then we'll see if any board member wants to pull it. And,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You know, after 55 years of working on a decomposed granite field, it's a pleasure for us to be in a position where we now are going to have a up-to-date field. We're going to have the first high school graduation, Gompers Preparatory Academy, 2012. I want to thank you for your voting to make sure it's named. Every high school in this district has its name on its field. Even La Jolla, though at another location, it's thought of and defined as on its field as La Jolla. We deserve nothing less than that. When I think of Madison and Crawford, your school, Dr. Evans, I figure that it's really important that we be given the same kind of consideration as the rest. So my hope is that you will focus on this as we've waited longer than we should have. 55 years on a decomposed granite field. We've done everything as a charter that was required of us. We've cleaned it, we fixed it, but we can't do it without you. Our parents have to go somewhere else if they have transportation to see their kids play. That, to me, is unacceptable. What we're looking for is a field that honors our community as well as our parents, students, and our faculty for all the good, outstanding work. Just check our scores and see how much we've improved. Please, don't say no. If you do, you're going to break some hearts.
Thank you, Cecil. Lisa Maples.
Good evening, President Barrera and distinguished board members. My name is Lisa Maples, and I reside in the Webster community. I've worked at Gompers since 1995. I was at Gompers when it was a magnet program, Gompers Secondary School, Center for Science, Mathematics, and Computer Technology. I was there when it became just Gompers Secondary School, grades 6 through 12. I was there when we separated into two distinct schools, Gompers Middle School and Gompers High School. I was there when the community decided to go charter, and the board approved the charter for Gompers Charter Middle School. and I'm proud to still be there today as the Assistant Director of Student Affairs for Gompers Preparatory Academy. I count it a privilege to not only work in the Gompers community, but to live and reside in the Gompers community. I have witnessed and experienced many changes over the years, but the one constant was the name Gompers. The Gompers field has been neglected since I've been in the Gompers community, and I'm sure even longer than that. And removing the name Gompers was never considered, as it continued to be an eyesore for the 20 years that I've been in the community. Now that there are plans for something new and beautiful in our community, this is your opportunity to acknowledge what one Gompers student asked 7 years ago. Don't we deserve good things? Please answer her and say yes. Shakespeare asked, very poignantly, question, what's in a name? And my answer to Mr. Shakespeare would be everything. There's power, history, community, pride, value, and distinction. I'm asking you today to please approve the naming of the field to be Gompers. Thank you.
Gerald, Carol.
Thank you, board members, President Barrera, Superintendent Koba. I'm an alumni of Gompers Secondary School, and it is a privilege to now serve as the Dean of Students at Gompers Preparatory Academy. It's been a dream for me. This is something that I didn't know I would do. I didn't leave Gompers thinking I was going to be working with students. And I've been there since I was 19 years old. And I've seen the best and worst of education. And it's sad that I've seen it at my school. So for me, it's emotional because it's home. And when you drive by and you see the change, why can't it be named after its home? The home is Gompers. The heart and passion is there. And I'm proud to be there every single day. It's hard going around and having to defend the name Gompers. For years, it was such a bad school. And now when you drive by and it's painted, there's no trash, no gangs. You see academics, education, safety, parent involvement. That's what we're about, and people can be proud of it. I'm proud to be a part of that. And I can say now, as a dean of students, that I work at my home school. So why can't we have our home field be named Gompers? It would be an honor and a privilege to say, as a 7th grade student, I've grown and I've come to see my school come full circle, and I can be home again. This is a dream. Please make our dreams come true. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, speaking to items E2 and E3, Citizen.
Regarding E2, continuing with the fraud hotline, I would also request that that we have fraud hotline reports brought to the board in a public session like this so that people can see what is coming from those fraud hotlines and what the outcome is and how people are being held accountable for issues that are brought up on the fraud hotline. Field trips, again. I'm concerned about students having to pay fees or being excluded from field trips because they don't have the money. I didn't look at this. I'm just looking at this on here now, but I don't know how these were funded. And if children are being sent on field trips through our schools, there should be adequate funding so that no child has to worry about asking for money or being made to feel that they're poor. Every child that steps on our campus should feel that they can participate, just because they all should have the equal opportunities at the schools.
Okay, speaking to item E3, Dr. Karen Childress Evans.
Good evening, school board members, Bill Koba, Nellie Meyer, Bill Stover. I've got good news for you guys tonight, and this is very exciting. I want you to know that in a time of budget crisis, everybody needs to step up and be part of the solution. And so thanks to Phil Stover and some comments and some brainstorming, we came up with this really cool idea. So I'd like to invite all of you to the first annual San Diego Unified School District All-Staff Glee Sing Out. Okay, this is a fundraiser for the San Diego Unified School District VAPA department. We need money for field trips. We need money for instrument repair. We need money for, we need money. So instead,
you might want to screen some of the singers because we need money.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because the audition process is you've got to think you're a singer, and at least 2 other people need to think you're singers. I'm personally asking you people, you board members, those of you that feel like you can fake it, I would like you to be there, but I really would like you to sing. And Superintendent Bill Koba, we have agreed that if you would come on board with us, we will do a rousing rendition of Anchors Away. The music is being selected as is. We will have rehearsal tapes for all of you remedial singers. We expect to have lots of men sing voices as well as women. This is what somebody referred to as suits to boots. We're doing classified, certificated. Anybody that is a member of our San Diego Unified School District family is welcome to come and join us. There are only 4 rehearsals. Tons of fun, and it's really a good morale booster, and it's to a good cause because it's going to help our kids get some of the programs that we're so desperately in need of. So thank you for letting me be here, and Mr. Stover, I start with you. Would you commit to this?
Absolutely. I will sing and conduct.
Yes, and conduct. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, thank God.
I see it says here it's free, $10, but free if you sing. Would you consider paying some of us not to sing?
Yeah, that's right. You might. All right. Speaking to item E22, Becky Breedlove.
Becky Breedlove, address on file. First of all, I just want to say how overwhelmed I think you all must be as I look at the consent agenda and 68 items, and many of them with documents and many of them with cost items, and many of them as I looked at, I thought, I got to speak to that, but I'm too ignorant to speak to most of those things, so I'll do my fair amount of questioning behind the scenes. But I did specifically want to mention a couple of things about the reports from HR, from Lamont with on I-22 or E-22. I very much appreciate the transparency, the being able to see those publicly, but I would like to suggest that those be given to us in a way that citizens who are not insiders can maybe more easily understand. Personally, I don't know how many of you have really looked at those 162 pages, but you can't figure out from the formatting what the columns, what the sort is on any of the columns. Secondly, there were some things that popped out that may just be data entry errors, but if there's data entry, that affects the bottom line. For example, on page 8, there's a person listed, I think is hourly, because that's HRL, who's getting $6,084 an hour. That's a lot of money. If indeed we have somebody who is getting that much money, I'd like to intern for him or her. Another thing that jumped out at me was that there are some teachers that are listed as advanced placement, and I'm assuming they get an extra differential for that, as well as being listed as a teacher, but there's a whole bunch of advanced placement teachers that are not listed in that particular way, so that concerned me. Another category that I looked at that I was confused about is called professional expert. I don't know what a professional expert is, but we have some in the district, and one of them is getting paid $100 an hour, while another one is getting paid $35 an hour. And I also saw some real differences in terms of retired people and what their pay was. So as we look at bottom line and ways to cut, I would hope that we could all become a little bit more aware of some of those things. And no slam, Lamont, I appreciate the fact that you are doing just, I can't even believe it, what you're up against and what you're doing. I appreciate it a lot. So that's all I have to say about that, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Becky. That's why we pay Lamont $6,000 an hour.
Well, he did get a nice promotion. That's what he has to pay.
That's right. All right. So does any board member wish to pull any item from the consent agenda?
I don't want you to pull what I want to speak to. I moved to get a consent agenda if there's no items pulled, but I want to speak to the staff about the items. Okay.
Does that mean that the items were... excuse me.
Yeah.
I'll make my comments. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the staff for... I sent them several questions, and I know it was maybe frustrating for them to get the answers back and have me ask them the questions a different way and all sorts of ways. But anyway, I just want to thank them because I know that sometimes it can seem like we're asking an awful lot of questions to get to some answers, but I thank them for responding to those questions. They helped me make a right decision, so a good decision. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not pulling any item.
Okay, so is that a motion to approve the entire consent agenda?
Second.
And we've got a second. Any comments? If not, please.
Question: are the ones that were pulled by the public? They're not pulled now.
Not pulled.
There's the consent calendar.
So passing this passes the ones that they want us to pass.
Passes all of them, except for the ones that will pull E53, E56, and E61 per our agenda.
Already withdrawn by the staff.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All in favor? Great. All right.
But I would like to know what a professional expert is as opposed to an amateur one. So maybe we can get a report back at a future meeting on that.
We'll ask the experts to tell us.
Yeah.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they'd be willing. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to item F2. So this is our STAR testing report. I think Ron, we're going to ask Ron to...
Yes, we're going to have Ron come forward. What I've asked Ron to do here is for, I think, public disclosure, although it's been circulated to the webpage and in some various media articles and reports to the board, is to quickly go down highlighting some of the results from standardized testing and the California high school exit exam. And Ron will open and close with a few key slides.
Great.
Thank you. Just a few opening comments, and as Mr. Koba mentioned, a lot of this information has been part of the media release, but just to reemphasize, this is the 6th year in a row that we've seen overall increases in both English language arts and math and science and history social science, so that's a positive finding. The district, compared to other urban districts, was first in English language arts among the districts that we use for comparison, third in mathematics. And we saw on our Casey results for those passing that the achievement gaps have closed over time. Unfortunately, in most cases on our CSTs, we do not see similar gap closure. So there are more detailed results available that we provided in the past via email and memo. And also, under Bernie Reinerson's direction, a booklet has been prepared that summarizes a lot of those results, and so that is available for more detailed information. So we're looking here at 5 years of data, and I just want to point out one difference with this is that we're looking only at district-managed schools in these results, so the numbers are just slightly different than those that were released by the California Department of Education. Unfortunately, when the CDE releases information, it includes some charter schools, but not all charter schools. And so, our preference would either be include them all or include none, because it's cleaner that way. So for this report, we've just looked at district-managed schools. On our website, we also have reports that include all of the charter schools. So if you're looking for more complete information, that's there as well. And it's also important to remember that these results include every student who was tested in the district. So in a couple of weeks we'll be looking at our accountability reports, and there's some filters applied to those data. But these data, again, are kind of raw data, every student who was tested in our district. And as you can see, in both English language arts and mathematics over the 5 years, about a 30% increase from 2007 to 2011. So and that's a pretty good return on investment if you're thinking about manufacturing. And the results are even more impressive with science and history social science. Again, we can see that our scores in science, we've doubled the percent proficient over the 5-year period. And with history social science, a 48% improvement. So clearly, some good things happening in those two areas. So as I mentioned, we always monitor our achievement gaps, one of our foci, as we move forward through the year. And unfortunately, we can see here with our two racial ethnic groups, the African American and Hispanic students, not a whole lot of change over the years. We see a 4-point decline for our Hispanic students, 2 points for African American. But of course, the good news is that all groups' achievement has improved. No one has declined over the 5-year period. Here we're looking at English learners versus non-English learners. And this, again, is any student who was an English learner on the day of testing. Again, when we look at our accountability results, the rules will be different. So here we're looking at a group with English learners that's probably more volatile than the opposite group. So over a 5-year period, there's differences in influxes of different immigrant groups who may have different levels of education. So it's hard to peg what's really happening with this gap difference. We'd have to do a more detailed analysis to know if the population of English learners was substantially different. So if we have a group that comes into the district who have had no formal education versus other English learners in a different year who might have more formal education, we would expect different results. And then we also are looking at our socioeconomically disadvantaged. Again, not a lot of change over the 5-year period. So that was English language arts, and now we turn our attention to mathematics. And again, we see that relatively no change over the 5 years, but again, both groups, or all groups in this case, have seen improved achievement across the 5 years. And then also looking at our English learner and socioeconomically disadvantaged groups on mathematics. Again, we see actually a slight increase with our socioeconomically disadvantaged. So that's one of our challenges, to look at those data and see where that has happened, what grade levels, what schools, etc. And here we're looking at those urban districts that I mentioned. And just one addition, Long Beach has some very late testing schools, so when we first generated this slide, their data were not available. Checked just before I came down today, and actually the data are now posted. So Long Beach is also at 51% on English language arts, so it would be in 4th position. And again, here we have San Diego the highest among those districts. And then in mathematics, we also have new results for Long Beach. They are tied with San Diego at 51%. And then finally, we'll turn our attention to our CASE results, the California High School Exit Exam. And again, these are results for students who are passing that exam. The literacy or English language arts portion is based on 10th grade standards in English language arts. The mathematics test goes up to first-year algebra. So those are the standards that are tested. And as we can see here, we have improving scores as we go across the 5 years. These are our 10th grade students. Every 10th grader must take the CASE in 10th grade. They have one opportunity in that year, and then multiple opportunities in 11th and 12th grade to continue taking that. They need a scale score of 350 points to pass that test. And again, when we look at accountability results in a couple of weeks, we'll look at proficient scores, which are 30 points higher. And a little bit different when we look at achievement gaps here on the CASE, we actually see some gap closure when we look at the percentage of students who are passing. So here we can see that African American students, there's a reduction in 7 points of the difference between them and the white student group. And for Hispanic students on English language arts or literacy, a reduction of 9 points. So again, better support for students to pass this particular exam. And then if we look at mathematics results for those student groups, again, we see that both African American and Hispanic students have improved more than has the white student group, both cases decreasing the gap by 8 points. And we have to recognize, of course, that the white student group started very high to begin with, and therefore it's more difficult to show growth over time. But still, it's a positive finding to see that that gap has decreased by 8 points. And then lastly, just to close, so we get our data, and then what do we do with it? Well, one of the first things that area superintendents do, and certainly Dr. Meyer and her team, is start looking at which schools improved. We need to figure out why their scores improved. So that's one of our first things that we do. And our department produces several reports for schools to use. Each area got a report that showed the schools in their cluster, overall cluster results, and then also results by individual schools, both school-wide and for their student groups. So they can look at the achievement of their English learners, the achievement of their socioeconomically over 5 years to see what's happening there. We also give them strand and cluster level reports. So if mathematics declined or if mathematics improved, they can look back retrospectively and see what happened in this particular area of mathematics. Was it algebraic thinking? Was it geometry? That getting to that level of specificity. And they can also take data that come out of our data tool data director, and they can look at their current students and see that same information. I've got 30 students in front of me as a teacher, or 40 or 45 as the case may be, unfortunately. Where are their strengths? Where are their challenges? So we give them all of those data to help inform instruction as they move forward. And then the other part of the analysis at this point is to look and see what sorts of supports or interventions are appropriate. One school may have had really strong achievement growth in a particular area. Did they implement some sort of intervention program with technology? We have that occurring at some schools. Did they do something with professional development? We start to look school by school and see if we can determine what's been attributable to those changes that have occurred. That's our brief summary. So
I think just some final wrap-up from staff is that we're very, I think, encouraged by the positive trend for another year. And I've said it in a number of forums. It's a reflection or a testimony to the administrators, the teachers, the support staff, and certainly the kids and parents for getting there. We have to work on the pace. How much and how quick are we getting there? And that's a part of that achievement gap. And where Casey was positive in the sense that it's cutting into the differential, not necessarily the case elsewhere. And ironically, tomorrow I go to the Superintendent County-wide Achievement Gap Task Force, and we'll talk about how the county looked, some things that we can do to share good ideas. But unfortunately, most of us are in the same place. We're not cutting into that difference the way we should be doing it. So working with each other, bringing good ideas. And then in October there'll be a superintendent principal forum down at the Civic Center like we've had in the past, where we'll get about 500 people together to talk about some of these things, and for certain schools and districts to brief us on what they're doing to make a difference. So there's a whole lot more to follow, but let's consider this a positive. And as Ron pointed out, working with Bernie Reinerson, they put together a academic performance booklet that we could share with the public as one of our communications tools for where we are, where we have been, and are going to build on success.
Right. Ms. Jackson.
First of all, I want to thank the staff and for their hard work and dedication, and certainly your comments are appreciated. However, the achievement gap piece is not working. We've been at this for a minute and we still have not been able to find a resolution. The reason I'm so I'm trying to be low-key at this tonight is that last night a parent spoke with me. And she said, when I was in the school system, this is a parent that volunteers at every one of her children's school from elementary up to high school, and she's still active. She said when she was in school, her school was a 1 or a 2, it was low. When she was in school, she's had 6 children, and her oldest is now in middle school, and her school in her community is still low. And she's asking, why can't we change that? Why won't the district, what can the district do to change that? And I think we can. I think we can because we've had money and now we're lean, but we still can. And as I had spoken previously last night at the Lincoln cluster, I was at the Crawford cluster at that particular time, but it is a joint effort here. And some of the things that we need to change is, number one, our staffing. A school cannot succeed if it has constant turnover in its staff. Many of our neediest schools have the youngest teachers. So whenever we talk about layoffs, that affects the teaching staff. Whether they end up getting laid off or not, it affects their role. And then many of them will get their notices and they'll go elsewhere. So the school has that constant turnover. Okay, the other thing is, again, looking at the curriculum. Last year when they came with the list of courses, and one of the ones was for Crawford, and I said, you can't tell me that expository writing is not in every high school. Okay, there are certain basic things that should be in every high school, regardless where it is. We never set that standard. So in some schools, people are able to not teach those higher level courses. So therefore, you're not going to get that big push, that acceleration of courses for those neediest the students. We got data director. We've had it for a number of years now. We're not monitoring who is using it and who is not. If people don't know, teachers and staff members aren't using it, who is monitoring that? We now have Learning Upgrade. So we're buying programs to help people, but the question is whether or not that is being done. Now we've established an accountability office, okay? The question that I have now is whether or not that office is going to do the monitoring that it takes to accelerate this achievement. Because I think that people are out there working every day, and so because they're working, we do see people doing some, but I think you have an acceleration if there's an additional layer saying, are all the teachers, using that director? Are looking at data, and teaching them how to use that data. But what I also said, just so you understand this, what I also said to the parents last night is that you're part of this as well. And I gave them the Parent Connect. I said every one of you should be connected so you know what your students are required to do. Community members, you are part of this as well. If the school is not successful, then you need to be willing to go over there and offer help. But they look to us. They look to us, the Board of Education and the Unified School District, to be the lead on this. And so I think that we are doing a good job, but I think we need to accelerate the academic achievement of all of our students. And if you do that, I think the gap will close because, of course, those that are lower will rise a lot higher to try to close that particular gap. But again, thank you for the report. We still have a lot of work to do.
Mr. Barnett?
Since being elected to this board, the thing that I think about the most as I, not being an educator, focus on a lot is the finances. And I often think that if we make all these changes in the finances and efficiency and all that, at the end of 4 years, will I be able to look back and will the achievement gap be narrowed and will our high school dropout rate be less? And those are why we're here, obviously. And I think there's a few things that we as a board need to do, and I agree with Ms. Jackson's comments about consistency in staffing, and I think we need to make that a priority of working with our bargaining groups to look at that this year and into the future. But this board has, I think we had a workshop recently where the superintendent didn't even get a chance to talk about some 40 different initiatives that this board has, starting with the past board and the current board. The most recent one, I think, was A to G, was one of the newest ones. And the question for me is, how many of those and which of those zero in on the most important issue? The achievement gap and the high school dropout. And I asked that about A to G at the time. I said, I agree completely with what we're doing, but is it going to help fix that issue or not? And we're going to be spending $13 or $16 million more over the next several years because of that. So I think we need to re-look at all of our initiatives, and the staff needs to say to us, these are the ones that absolutely will impact these top priorities, and these less so. Maybe there's a scale, and then we both, from a financial point of view and a policy point of view, have to say, this is what we want you to focus on, this is what we're telling the teachers, the principals, the classrooms, the parents, etc. The other issue is are we using the dollars we spend to actually improve student achievement? Well, one thing the Title I Tiger team was trying to look at was whether we can actually measure that a dollar spent is best spent this way to improve achievement and reduce dropouts. And if we're not there, we need to determine how we get there, because once again, if we are not spending the dollars best, most strategically to solve these problems, then that's where we're failing. So we have two opportunities where we can make a difference. We can review our initiatives and say, out of all these, which are the top 2 or 3 which absolutely are going to meet this goal? And number 2, we need to look at the dollars and make sure we develop, going forward, if we can't do it in the past, a quantifiable way to know where the dollar is best spent. I know Mr. Beiser, who's in the classrooms all the time, has mentioned a number of things which he thinks is the best way to improve achievement, including after school, and I believe him that. He's a teacher. He's in the classroom. He understands that. I don't pretend to. But we need to focus on those areas, and I'm hoping that's the lesson that comes out of this, is that it doesn't seem to be working, narrowing this gap, whatever's been happening in the past. I mean, except minor. So we need to decide, why is that, and are there things within our control that we can do to make us narrow those gaps?
Yeah, Dr. Maher.
I was just going to confirm that one of the things that we as an academic team have worked on is developing our focus. And we found with many initiatives that are all over the place that it's very difficult to close the achievement gap when we're trying 20 different things and it's very unclear how well we've implemented any one of them. So a perfect example of this is the Casey exam. The focus on the literacy and the math that has been done with the Casey exam via Learning Upgrade, as was mentioned by Board Member Jackson, parallel classes, partnerships with the county, and all of these things focusing on that particular goal has really led to great achievement and the beginning of the closing of the achievement gap. So it's really exciting. And as a group, we're looking at developing professional learning communities, and as a result of those, they will focus in on the subgroups, looking at the data to see what they need to increase those CSTs. And I just want to note, in 2013-14, we're headed into the core national standards. So we're looking at a complete shift. And as a group, we want to, first of all, avoid that implementation dip that you get when you switch. But I want to recognize that this change will engage students differently. It will have broader questions, problem solving. It will develop problem solving. And that shift in focus will be critical to really reaching all of our students and preparing our students in a way that we have not done, at least to the degree that we need to. So that particular focus that was mentioned is critical.
That's great. Dr. Rubin.
Yes, I'd like a couple of points, one for Mr. Rohde and one for Dr. Meyer. I think we do need to note that these are good results in terms of showing that the district has been making steady progress, and I do believe that one of the reasons that we have had steady progress is in some ways administrators, boards, and other people kind of getting out of the way and letting the teachers do their job as opposed to just crazy, exciting new initiatives all the time. We've seen that steady growth. I mean, science was a good example in that in the last few years. But one issue here is, and I think we also have to be very clear that we're looking at just very broad, gross measures of academic achievement with these numbers. So we don't want to get too focused on a particular number. And one of the things that we've been trying to emphasize on the board is really focusing more on individual growth. And I know Mr. Barrera has brought this up a lot, but when you're focusing on averages, the best way to improve your school's average scores is to help the average student do a little better, and that will improve your scores. Too much work with the lower students. The upper students, they're already up there, don't bother. And so what we really want is for every student to be improving their achievement every year. And I'm even wondering, even though this is a very limited snapshot we get from these scores, if we have the data manipulation ability to actually look at individual growth, because we're comparing the fourth graders this year to the fourth graders last year. But Jimmy Garcia is in fourth grade this year and he's in fifth grade next year. There has to be some way to pull out that data, and whether that's a low-performing student or very high-performing student, so we can have the gate at one end and the other end. Is what we really want to look at is every student making whatever we would define as substantial growth. And that's what we're trying to move towards. But I'm even wondering, with these particular scores we have now, do we have the capacity to tease that out?
We are challenged by the way that the California standards were written, in that they are not vertically scaled from grade to grade. So if you look at second grade standards and third grade standards, they are not necessarily built to linearly to grow from year to year. There's some differences that are tested each year. In addition, the scales for the different grade levels are unique to the grade levels. So you can't look at a scale score from one year. If you get 330 one year and you get 340 the next year, that's not necessarily an improvement because there's different cut points. So we have some challenges built in with the way our state exams and our state frameworks were designed. As Dr. Meyer mentioned, though, we are moving to the Common Core state standards, and with those will be new assessments. The good news with those is, in addition to adding more rigor, more items that look at deeper level thinking, the assessments will be scaled from grade level to grade level, so you will be able to measure growth from year to year with these new assessments. They are also going to be computer adaptive, which means that students will take them on the computer, and you can have fewer items to actually pinpoint the specific skills of students, but you also get deeper information about strengths and challenges students are having. So there's some real positive things coming out of those exams. But unfortunately, for accountability purposes, those will not be ready until 2014-15. We'll start doing some piloting and field testing prior to that. So I know it's not a good answer for the interim. We're still struggling with how we can get at measuring that annual year's growth for every student.
I suppose what you could do now would be you would be able to determine what percentile example performance the student is at fourth grade compared to other fourth graders and the percentile in fifth grade. But that's a comparison. I think what we really want to move towards is mastery, not just comparison to the other students, that they've really mastered the material. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up with Dr. Meyer has been working on is just this whole issue. We have these scores and reports and the schools listed and so forth, but we've been talking about measuring student success and school success in a lot of other ways. And I would hope that by even this time next year, at the same time that we're presenting these scores, that these other factors could be brought up also. And I also firmly believe that when we are emphasizing the other factors, that these scores will go up correspondingly anyway. But could you just say a little bit about what that would be like and what would be covered?
Certainly. I've been working with the area superintendents and the assistant superintendent on looking at a template and having a template. And really over the last year we worked with a variety of stakeholder groups, and we're just starting now to look at a variety of indicators. So for example, we want to know what a student is involved in, extracurricular activities, the music that they're involved in, and also monitoring, for example, where they do rank each year. It may not be scaled, but you can see this year they're proficient. Then they, if they go below basic, something's wrong. What we can track and see what happened. We're also working with Daryl Lagasse's department because his business intelligence program helps us isolate some of these factors, and he's putting together some mock models that will have some of the data reporting that we hope to upload onto some of these templates. One of our goals that I haven't discussed yet with my team is to look at some kind of transcript that is something that we can send out in January. So that way, and we don't know at what level, perhaps high school makes sense, but something that parents can see as a communication tool that includes information that we've discussed about that child. So this 1 year's growth has been a big puzzle, and we've been working on it heartily. I hope that that the core standards will help us towards mastery, but it's really exciting to present the information and look at it in a different way. We anticipate it will have better results for college acceptances and all sorts of other things.
That's great.
First, I'd like to congratulate every single teacher and staff member at our school sites in the central office and all the administrators. These numbers are phenomenal. This is important. This is huge. These results over the trends over the last 5 years are something that we should all be high-fiving each other over. I mean, for large urban school districts with our level of students in poverty and the other challenges, the language challenges that most of our students face in our schools, these results are incredible. And anybody that says anything less than that doesn't understand what's happening in our schools. And that is specifically to the credit of every single person working in this school district day in and day out to help these kids succeed. With that, I do have a couple comments in terms of some of the things that Board Member Barnett had mentioned. I share his concern, making sure that we're spending our limited resources on research-based, effective programs and support strategies to help improve student learning. And that's something that actually I've been very vigorously engaged with Dr. Nellie Meyer this year on. We looked at some middle schools that came out of PI at the beginning of the year in December and January. And we said, what did this school do to come out of program improvement? Why is this school now performing? And we looked at some of the things that they did. They brought students in after school and on Saturday for more support and intervention and help. They used things like Learning Upgrade so that students would have the opportunity to learn on an internet, computer-based model to get more practice and support. These are some of the things that now we're sharing with other schools and rolling out district-wide in the hopes of helping those kids realize success where before they hadn't had that opportunity, that support, that intervention. So this is just the beginning. The other research-based strategies that schools have been using that have come out of program improvement that are now performing are professional learning communities. I mean, DeFore has a great book on that, and that's really important research. And that's the kind of things that we're doing in the school district that are making a difference. We're looking around the country and we're saying, what are schools doing that's working? And we're looking at it and adopting it in our school district. And that's the joy of being on this board, is to watch people like Dr. Meyer look at those programs and implement them. One of the other things that we as a board have talked about through A through G is in that A through G proposal, a lot of the professional professional development is to implement AVID strategies across the curriculum, so that AVID strategies in the classroom, those are instructional things that we can do to help kids get a better understanding of what they're doing. Cornell notes, using different kinds of questioning, getting kids working together collaboratively and helping each other so that they all can learn more. These are the kinds of things that we're doing in the school district to take where we're at now to the next level. And that's what's so exciting about being on the board. To Dr. Evans' concerns about tracking student growth, we can do that now in Data Director. And I'm sure lots of teachers are doing it. I know several principals are doing it. A lot of principals' offices have these kids with their first names on a poster. These are all of their basic, below basic, and far below basic students. They know the name of every single student in their school that needs more help, so we can lift them up on the next year's assessment to measure their student growth. And that's what's exciting about Data Director. Is at my classroom, in my algebra classroom, I have a list of all my 57 students that last year tested basic, below basic, or far below basic, or we don't have data on them. And we're giving those kids extra support and intervention, and that's exactly what's happening in a lot of our schools in San Diego Unified, and that's what's exciting. One of the things that I do have a couple questions, I don't know if you have the data now or the information. Can the public go to sandy.net and look at each individual school's performance on this state exam or the START testing report?
Yes, it's there. If you go to the Office of Accountability under Departments, there's a link called My School, and you can go directly to the...
Okay, so you go to sandy.net, and then you go to the Office of Accountability Department, and then you go down to My School and click on that, and you can see every school or your school in your community and see how did your specific school do.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing is, one of the things that we've measured is how many schools do we have performing at, according to the state API, 900 or above? And how many schools do we have at 800 and above? Do you have any of that data or those numbers?
We have those numbers. We are bringing those forward with an accountability report at the next board meeting, so I haven't shared those tonight.
Okay, then I'll wait to celebrate that victory. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thanks. Yeah, Superintendent.
Just one final word. Everything that the board members have shared with us, and I think Nellie and Ron are all consistent, a part of an integrated effort. We are using Data Director ever increasingly after 3 years of learning the system. I think you've heard tonight we want to make data-driven decisions that are the focus of professional learning communities, led by a principal who's providing an integrated approach across the campus. And we actually now are telling the principals by a report how many times people are accessing Data Director. We want that data to be made strategically available, because otherwise you see these big aggregate slides and you can't figure out how are we going to cut 30 points if we aren't going after those children with the specific intervention strategy. So more of that to follow. I think you're going to see more impacts in a positive way.
So, yeah, a couple of comments. I echo everything that the other board members have said, and especially just the incredible sense of gratitude, I guess is the right word, for our school communities. You know, for our teachers and classified staff and parents and students and principals and administrators. You know, Ron, you talked about return on investment. Well, we're seeing the return. We're not seeing the investment, and you know, I think we'd be hard pressed in either locally or in the state of California to find any effort that is achieving more with fewer resources than public schools, because I think that, you know, the consistent growth that we're seeing here in San Diego Unified, and obviously we're very proud of the position that our district is in, but we're seeing this type of growth going on across the state. Public schools are getting better and better and better in this state, while the state government is disinvesting from public education. And it's just an incredible story that we need to constantly be out there telling, that public education works. It's working. It's getting better. And I don't believe in this sort of concept of pay for performance, but the people who do argue for this concept of pay for performance pay up because public schools are performing. So the story of public schools in the middle of this incredible disinvestment. The work that's going on school by school, again, just needs to be acknowledged and celebrated, but also we need to fight hard to protect it because it's in such a precarious position, as we see, constantly the potential to really disrupt everything that, Kevin was talking about that we know is actually working. I look forward to the report on the schools because, I think one thing that we acknowledge here in the district and that we, I think are committed to is our district is in a lot of ways, just a sort of an umbrella where the real story is 180 some odd school communities. And we know one-size-fits-all approaches are not the way that we're going to continue to see improvement in our schools. We know that I was interested in what Kevin was talking about. How many schools are at 900? How many schools are at 800? If we could get maybe a visual when you do the report, sort of a map of schools with trends over time of, maybe over the last 5 years, if, going from, red to yellow to green, the number of schools, that are improving, and where we still have, schools that we need to get in there and do more work. But I think we've got the stories of what's happening individual school community by school community that not just in a couple of weeks, but in an ongoing, I think we need to hear those stories constantly, here at the board. We need to hear the success stories and what's happening so that we as a board and as the superintendent and Dr. Meyer, so that we're in better position to understand how our decisions either support the great work that's going on, or where we're making decisions that might get in the way. So again, just maintaining the humility, here in this building, understanding that the real story is going on in the school communities, and our question always just has to be, given the progress that school communities are making, how do we support you, and how do we fight to protect the work that continues to go on? Because of the progress that I think this district has made, among large urban districts, I also think we've got a responsibility. This is one of the conversations that Cindy's here from Central, and that I have with Tavaga from time to time. Schools that achieve great results have a responsibility of letting the broader community know why, know what's happening. I think we need to take that responsibility on as a district. If you look at the position that we're in among large urban districts, again, in literacy, the incredible growth that we've seen in science, we need to be at the forefront of informing both the debate at the state level and the national debate about what works. And we frankly need to be more confident and more clear than we've been in the past about what ideas really don't work or could get in the way of the success that's happening at the individual school level. So I think we just need to vigorously engage in that conversation from the position of a large urban school district that's seen great growth and great improvement with the continued challenges that we're facing. And I also just absolutely want to echo what Dr. Evans was saying is we also, I believe, are at the forefront of thinking through more important and broader measures of student achievement than what we're seeing in these sort of once-a-year tests. What more than the numbers, and what Nellie is talking about, and I know what the team has been talking about is the question is, are we doing a good job in our schools of preparing kids to succeed in life? That's the question. And what are the most important ways that we can measure that? And so, yeah, I agree with Dr. Evans that it would be great next year to at least have some baseline, presentation of how as a district and how school by school we're doing at preparing kids to succeed in life, and how are we measuring that? And I think because of the success that we're having in the dominant way that student achievement is measured today, so we don't, we've never taken the position as a district that the tests are unimportant. What we've said is, of course, it's important to measure these basic levels of proficiency, in the different subjects, and we don't shy away from that level of accountability. In fact, we excel at it. But we believe there's much, much more, to measuring student achievement, and we're going to step into that debate and have something to say. But again, thanks your leadership, Dr. Meyer and Superintendent Koba, and what we're seeing in our school communities. Thank you, Ron. Okay, let's move on to. Can we get a?
I move
approval
G1
on G1 and
G2.
G1 and G2. Great. Please vote. Okay, can we get an update on the Tiger teams? Mr. Barnett and Mr. Beiser. You go first.
As the board knows, there's two outstanding, meaning two remaining, I should say, Tiger teams. They're all outstanding, who are currently in process, who are finished their work, the VAPA Tiger team and the Title I Tiger team, and we're going to have presentations from both of those within the next few weeks, agendized. Right. Also, because we've had a lot of discussion about real estate and real estate issues and so forth, Mr. Beiser and I have agreed that one of the next Tiger teams to start up will want to be looking at our entire real estate department. And once again, these Tiger teams include staff members who are doing the work, to community members, to teachers, and whoever is interested, and it's been very eclectic. And we'll announce probably at the next meeting exactly when that first meeting of that Tiger team will be.
And that will, the invitation to participate will be incredibly open and transparent. All the meetings will be very open and transparent. All that information is on the website, sandy.net. We'll also, to create a crossover between the Real Estate Oversight Committee, I want to encourage the members of that committee to participate in the Real Estate Tiger team. Hopefully that the Tiger team can come to the board in a short and quick period of time with some specific recommendations so that we can see impacts within the next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
I move items H2 to H5.
Thank you.
Second.
Please vote. Okay, item H6. Bernie, do you want to fill us in on where we are? Redistricting Advisory Committee work.
Thank you, President Barrera and members of the board. I'm pleased to be here this evening to give you the report of the Redistricting Advisory Committee and your staff for the board to make its decision on redistricting the subdistricts to be consistent with the 2010 census. And I'm looking in the audience for Brian Pollard, but I'll give you a report on your committee, who did a wonderful job, and I want to commend the board for the individuals that you selected. We had a short time frame. Yep. They got down to work. They were very focused. Unfortunately, Mr. Roberts is ill this evening, and he couldn't be here. He called me this afternoon, and he wanted to make sure that the board knew that he was not feeling well. Came back from Hawaii with a pretty serious cold. Pat Hom had something come up and she couldn't make it. Mr. Legretti had a conflict, and I thought Mr. Pollard would be here, but unfortunately, I think what it indicates is how satisfied they were with their work.
Their work is done.
Because there's very, very little controversy there. You have a report before you of a map that they provided. I do want to introduce our consultant consultants from ArcBridge, Sam and Pretty Mather. They did a wonderful job and came out here from the East Coast where they're based, worked with our committee and made adjustments. The software that they had enabled us to put together a new district map that has a less than 1% deviation from the highest to the lowest population in the districts. In comparison, in 2000, the board at that point accepted a deviation of 6% between the districts. I also want to thank Roy McPhail, who is right here behind me, who provided the technical support. This redistricting map that is before you, and I don't know if Cheryl, you could just put it up so that the public can see it, has very minor adjustments that needed to address the population needed in subdistrict D, and subdistrict D needed to come up, and therefore the adjacent districts C and B were where we had to go to get that population. So we made about 7 minor adjustments. It only affects 3 schools, Grant Elementary, Clay, and Hoover High School. Those are the only schools where representation of board members will change. It gets the population to an almost perfect balance. It has very little change in the ethnic population in the districts from what you had before. The process that the Redistricting Advisory Committee did was several public meetings. One was held in Ballard Center, where the area where one of the changes was made. Another out in Rolando Park at Clay. We noticed all those meetings through the ConnectEd system, sent literally 90,000 phone calls and 60,000 emails to our parent community. We did get participation from the public on the website and at those meetings. The Redistricting Advisory Committee took all of that into account and actually made adjustments at their last meeting in response to public comment to finally get to this particular map that's before you. You also know that we're under a deadline with the Registrar of Voters, so that's why it's noticed for action for you tonight. The next step will be for Mr. McPhail to work with our consultant and get the data file that is needed by the Registrar to get their process done so that this will be effective for the June primary in 2012. I think that's all I really want to say is that, thank you to the committee for the work. Thank you to the board for appointing such a hard-working and dedicated committee. I think the map before you reflects the changes, the minimal changes that needed to be made, and it's ready for your consideration. And Roy and I are here to answer questions. Our consultants are here if you have any specific data questions.
I move approval with one modification, please. And that is in your written document on item number 4. You have Rolando Park goes from B to E, and it should be Clay.
Oh, the Clay is the school that goes from B to E. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
But the neighborhood is. The neighborhood is.
Right. Yes.
Right.
I just want to make sure that.
Right. We've got that.
Right. I just want to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
second the motion for the recommended map.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I just a couple of. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate the work that everybody did. And it really was a situation of minor adjustments. And I know that the committee was very receptive to the public in terms of looking at other alternatives. But, absolute equal number exact of every district is not reasonable. What's more reasonable is communities of interest. And when you have less than 1% deviation, that's excellent, and the communities of interest are intact. So I think they've done a really good job.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes, I just want to clarify because the map we're looking at is option 5, right?
That's correct.
And in this particular map, unlike the other ones, it doesn't at least list, unless it's on the back page, the schools that are moving. So I just want to make sure that the schools that we're talking about are still only, is it Grant?
Hoover, Grant, and Clay.
Grant, Hoover, and Clay.
Okay.
The schools.
The schools that will move. Secondly, I'm assuming, and the line is awfully close, since I recently signed another 13-month lease, I'm assuming that the lines are, we're not.
I do believe we had your current address, and it doesn't move as far into, I think, Little Italy is where your residence is. And the only adjustment there is in the downtown San Diego area, which is...
Right. I know, it's awfully close. And secondly, can we, since I'm moving quite a significant part of my district, am I allowed to pick particular individuals I could move to other colleagues' districts as well? Just in a little attempt at humor there. But okay. Otherwise, I mean, it sounds like the staff did a good job and the committee did a good job. Obviously, there are schools that have been in the sub-district that, you miss them, but I'm sure Mr. Barrera will take care of Grant effectively. So in this map, Chesterton does not move in Kearney.
That was in an earlier alternative, and that was not included in the final recommended map.
Okay.
So just to double verify, I'm sure the consultants did this, but that Mr. Barnett's current residence, you have not changed residence in the last year, is included in the district he's in.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thanks to the committee, and thanks to the Mathers for your excellent work. With that, please vote. Great. Okay, let's move on to H8. This is the item around the posting of the closed session agenda. Superintendent, is there any discussion about this?
Yes, President Barrera. This is the intention that we will be posting closed session agendas as was discussed previously, and it's effective with your board approval.
Right. So we have a motion to that.
Move to approve.
Yeah, second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Unless there is. So I think one of the discussion, one of the items of whether or not the closed session is posted online. Is it just posted on the window? I think there was some of the comments that were I think I heard again last night was that the closed session and the special agendas are only posted here on the entrance to the Ed Center, and the people who want to know have to come physically down here to see it. And so in this particular write-up, does it say that it's going to be online, or can it be online? Can I modify? Is that not the intent for it to be online?
Do you want me to respond?
Yes.
Currently, the closed session agendas are posted in the window, and that complies with the Brown Act. And anyone that has asked us for copies of the agenda for closed session, we email them to them. We have about 9 people on that list. This would, if you take action to post online the closed session agenda, on the district's webpage, that agenda would be there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what. Okay, so is this allowing that provide to print and digital media? I mean, I'm asking. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Okay, in this particular item here, are we now posting the closed session agenda online?
No. It gets mailed to people that are requesting it, and it's posted in the window here in the...
Is there any reason why we can't post it online?
No.
And that's the action.
It's your preference. It's your preference.
That's what I'm asking. I'm trying. Maybe I'm not asking it the right way.
The wording I can understand. The wording says the public open agenda. Oh,
that's the open. Yeah. My question was the closed session agenda, and it sounded like you said that the closed session agenda is still only posted on the window, on the doors here, and it's mailed to those that are
correct.
requesting.
That's the second paragraph.
And so my question is, does this motion that is on the table now include posting it online?
I believe that's what the motion was.
Yes. You're right. The action doesn't clarify.
But in your motion, do you want to just state that, Mr.
Yeah. So there's a motion on the floor.
Right. Well,
the motion to post the closed session agenda online.
That's the motion. Okay.
Because the description of the item was written up, leaving it open depending upon what you decided you wanted to do.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is posted online. Very good. Okay. Got it.
Okay. Please vote. Yeah.
And others. There's others that have mentioned it to me.
Okay, great. Let's move on to item I-1. This is our Brighten the Life project at Kearney. Superintendent or Lee, if you want to...
I'm going to have Mr. Stover and Mr. Doberoff take this one.
Yeah, Lee's going to come up and tell you about this project. We've been working on it for, months and months and months now. We met with the folks back in the winter time, and Lee's going to give you an update and ask for your approval to proceed with the project.
Okay, well, basically this is a volunteer project. We were approached by Brighten a Life, and they're doing a lot of this kind of work throughout the Southwest region, and they have hopes of doing it in all over the United States. They have 4 projects that are currently scheduled to be built this school year. They're working with LA Unified. They're working with a couple school districts in Phoenix. I had the opportunity to talk to Sue Pierce, who's the Director of Facilities Planning and Energy at Washington Elementary School District, which is the largest school district in the state of Arizona, and they've got projects working there. And really, the foundation for this project is. It's really private companies that are pooling their resources, and these are major Fortune 500 companies that you've all heard the names of, pooling their resources to really help schools that serve needy student populations like ours. And so this particular project's at Kearney High School. It's a 10,000 square foot building. We had planned to build a building there to replace older portables as part of Proposition S. This will actually save us some money because all we're going to end up doing is building the foundation and underground utilities with Proposition S dollars, and the Brighten a Life Foundation would provide the rest of the resources.
Great. We've got two speakers. I just want to call Marshall Zatara and Barbara Carpenter.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Brighten Life and the Green Schoolhouse Series. We're very excited about partnering with San Diego Unified School District to bring the deserving students of your district a green schoolhouse. The Green Schoolhouse Series is a strategic partnership with Brighten Life and Cause and Effect Evolutions. Marshall Zatara is with Cause and Effect Evolutions, and he'll speak a little bit about what they do for the project in a moment. Brighten Life is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to impact the learning environments, living conditions, and communities of low-income families, children, and seniors. For about 15 years, Brighten Life has worked with about 16,000 volunteers on 560 projects in the Southwest, California, Arizona, and a few in Florida to help improve homes, do some painting, landscaping, and revitalization of schools as well. Green Schoolhouse Series is our signature project. It's meant to build sustainable, permanent structures that are eco-friendly and environmentally sound on low-income Title I school campuses. Starting in Phoenix, our program is scheduled to launch in this academic year of 2011-2012 with 2 schoolhouses being built in the Phoenix area, one on Roadrunner Elementary School District and the other at Orangewood. As Lee had mentioned earlier, Sue Pierce is in charge of those areas. We also have a partnership with the Maricopa County Community College District, and we will be building 2 6,000 square foot schoolhouses on their Green Learning Campus, which is part of Mayor Phil Gordon's project in Phoenix. They will be the anchor buildings for the school project. The school that will be built on Kearney will be approximately 10,000 square feet. The Green Schoolhouse is designed with 3 pillars of purpose. They're to provide additional classrooms for the schools in a more healthy environment than the older, outdated portables that have now become fixtures on many school campuses throughout the nation. It's also to provide housing for after-school programs to relieve some of the burden on the school itself, and also to provide an area for the community to meet that is frequently missing from different areas throughout the schools. And with schools being closed and energy saving, etc., the school The Green Schoolhouse itself will provide a space for the community to meet and really become a part of the community on campus. In addition, the school itself will be a learning tool. Everything in the school will be sustainable, 21st century teaching environment, and everything will be built with the school and the needs of the school, the community, and the school district in mind. Does that mean I have to stop?
It does, yeah. Right. It sounds great, though. Okay. Maybe Mr. Zataro.
Thank you. Good evening, and we appreciate your time. To continue just for a couple more minutes, I think what Barbara was alluding to is that this school is designed to be the world's first LEED Platinum school built entirely by volunteers. So right from the beginning, the San Diego Unified School District will be making a statement by helping to construct a school of this kind of proportion. I think the school itself as a learning tool will help our students understand sustainability, understand green jobs of the future, and really set an example of where classrooms in the future are going. The school is 10,000 square feet, as Barbara mentioned, and there are multiple benefits to the students who will be participating with the school. Probably the most important thing, in my opinion, is it's giving students in an area hope, inspiration, that they get something this cool and this hip. It's a school that will be designed by Harley Ellis Dover Architects, which is an architectural firm that has done work for the district. They are renowned throughout the country to build these kinds of educational facilities. The general contractor is Areno Construction, based right here in San Diego. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of volunteerism, there's a lot of in-kind, there's a lot of donations that would go into building the school. We selected San Diego Unified because we do select the largest school district in each market that we go into first, and we give them a chance. Thus far, we're batting 1,000, and as I believe Barbara Lee said, we do have projects happening in Phoenix and in Los Angeles, and soon to be also in San Francisco. One of the reasons we wanted to work with Kearney High School was the fact that with the 4 small high school platform, the Construction Academy obviously provides some synergies that could really do some great things. The Science School, the Digital Media School, and certainly the International Business School. So we felt like this was a really great district to offer this, and also a great school. So I think my few minutes is almost up. If you have any questions, I'm certainly more than welcome to answer.
Yeah, just I wanted to follow up on what we were talking about with the different schools at Kearney. So are students involved in the project, and if so, how?
Yes, absolutely. They are as involved as the principals at the school would like them to be. One of the areas that the architectural firm wanted to get the Construction Academy involved is because of the obvious construction of a sustainable building.
Right.
We are also looking to bring the new School of Architecture involved, and I think provide some of the high school students. There were some very intriguing and rare possibilities of them understanding what it takes to build a school from scratch.
All right, terrific. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for bringing the project to San Diego Unified and to Kearney. Can we get we got a motion?
Second. I just want to comment that I think that this could also, I know when you're getting the next measure of the next item on the agenda of the school realignment and so forth, this is going to increase the capacity of Kearney. And so there's a lot of possibilities for how all the facilities can be used, I take.
Okay. Just very briefly, I think this is it sounds like a wonderful project, and I want to thank the staff, because I know I've been asking them to Google and look, and certainly I have my reservations. I think this is very good, and it's moving in the direction that we're moving as a district. I have a concern, and I think that some of these you've answered, but I just want to make sure that these things are on record, that this school, that our labor compliance person will be on site to monitor this particular project, that this project will also have DSA approval. I'm concerned because this is all volunteers, and sometimes that goes against our contract with our bargaining units. And so now we're going to start building schools that are all volunteers. So I do certainly have a concern with doing that as well. And then the ability that we are now, because what we're actually doing in this motion also is allowing a nonprofit to use our name to raise donations, to solicit volunteers. And I do have a concern when we release that particular authority out to nonprofits. And certainly I've shared this with Lee and the superintendent, the precedent that this is setting. So if we're going to allow this particular nonprofit to come on, and I know they're starting their projects this fall. I went to your website to see where you are, and you haven't completed one of these projects yet. I know you're on line for this particular fall, but the question is, if other nonprofits now come and say, you know what, why can we now build a building, or can we now have access to the schools to do projects? What is going to be the criteria that we set to decide that? Because and then if we allow the nonprofits, then can private entities then come in and say, you know what, I want to build a building and I'm going to use my particular staff, because the concern that I have is that we're now allowing other people to determine who's going to be working on our school buildings, and then what is our long-term liability in that particular case. The question that you answered for me earlier was that, yes, they are required to get the current insurance that we use when we are building buildings, but according to your memo, after 5 years, the building becomes ours. And if it's ours and there's issues in it where it's plumbing, electricity, or whatever, then are we now on the hook for that? So it's because of all of those things I can't support this particular item. I think it's good, and I'll probably be out there looking and walking and supporting you in that way, but I can't support it as delegating our responsibility to a nonprofit.
Phil or Lee, did you want to respond to any of Ms. Jackson's questions?
I can tell you that, we've spent probably more, Barbara would tell you, we spent more time, and especially our legal department, thanks to our legal department, spent a lot of time working on the MOU with Brighten a Life because of the risk involved. In anytime you build, especially a fairly large project with volunteer labor, there's you're getting something for free, but anytime you're not buying something, it creates a risk, and there are challenges related to that. So we spent an awful lot of time, probably about, in fact, this project started last school year, so at least 4 or 5 months back and forth with our legal team and Brighten a Life, working on the MOU, working on the language to protect the interests of the district to the best of our ability, with the realization that these are volunteers that are gifting us their labor and material and equipment in these companies. This will be designed by a licensed architect in the state of California. It will get DSA approval. It will have DSA full-time inspection while it's being built. The contractor will need to have a state contractor's license, either A or B license for general contractors is required. They will be required, the individuals will be fingerprinted in accordance with Ed Code in terms of protecting students, etc. So all of those requirements are in the MOU to protect the district's interest. And we also, as you mentioned, Board Member Jackson, they are also required to carry the insurance that we would require a general contractor to carry. The portion of the work that is done by the school district is going to be bid out in accordance with Public Contract Code and under all the stipulations that are required therein, because the district does have to build the foundation and underground utilities for this project. So I think we did our diligence to protect the interests of the district the best we could. Other entities that might come to us will have to overcome those same high hurdles that we've asked Brighten a Life to overcome. And I hope this is a success, and I hope we can do this type of project in other parts of the district. But this is a test case, and we'll see how it goes, and have some lessons learned, and hopefully a big success. So.
Okay, well, I believe we've got a motion, right? A motion in a second? Yep.
I just want to make one comment. I think it's real. I want to congratulate you for the work you're doing on this. I think it's really important that we encourage volunteer participation, community participation, donations to the school district, and so forth. It's come up on other issues in terms of technicalities as far as foundations and all those types of things, and we do have to be very careful to make sure that we are not creating situations that cause headaches in the future or put the district on the hook for things that we didn't plan to pay and so forth. But I think we need to really work hard at making these type of things work, and I think this is a really wonderful opportunity for that.
Great. No further comment. Please vote. Great. Thank you. Okay, item I2, our school closure realignment recommendations.
Phil Stover will provide the presentation.
Yes, thank you. Let me get my clicker. Yes, this is the second in a series of reports that the School Realignment Closure Committee is going to be making to the board. And our goal tonight is for the board to take action on 3 recommendations from the staff and the committee. The committee has been meeting, as we've told you before, since January. On basically our task, the core part of our task has been to identify a minimum of 10 schools, to identify for closings as part of our budget reduction strategies for next year for a minimum of $5 million in operational ongoing savings. We've tried to balance that responsibility with the board mission. That is, we want to have a quality school in every neighborhood. So our focus has been on what do we need to do in every neighborhood. We've looked at all the clusters. We've gotten down into such factors as where are the canyons, what are the traffic patterns, where can students walk, where are the freeways, those kinds of very simple issues. And then we've done a tremendous amount of data analysis that we'll give you examples of in just a few minutes. We have had 20 staff members on this committee. We have focused also on the board's administrative procedure 3113, which you adopted last year, and then in August you agreed that procedure would be amended in the sense of reducing the time frame for the implementation. The original intent of the procedure was about a 10 to 12 month process. The decision was made to reduce that so that we could come back to you in December with final recommendations for you to vote on, because this is indeed part of our budget strategy. And we've also had advice from the veterans of these kinds of efforts in our districts that if you do make the determination to close any schools, those schools are going to have what Administrative Procedure 3113 calls a transition time. And that transition time is a minimum of 6 to 9 months, where the schools would prepare, the receiving schools that would be receiving students would prepare. So we need to have this done, we believe, by December, both for budget purposes and for transition time purposes as well. Now, we've looked at school enrollment, school capacities, school utilization, and school configuration. Those are the 4 principal characteristics of 3113 that a group such as ours are to look at. What we've done that in a way that we will be prepared to, should you approve the process that we've begun, give us direction to proceed, starting tomorrow. In fact, we kind of almost started today with some clusters calling, emailing me wanting to do this real quick, should you approve it, where we will begin scheduling cluster meetings to go over the data that the committee has looked at, some initial thoughts from the committee as far as these 4 topics: enrollments, capacities, utilizations, and configuration of schools. And in our thinking, we're looking at grade level, perhaps some grade level changes. We're looking at the movement of programs, where programs may need to move to a different location for expansion purposes to reach their full potential, as well as closing schools. Now, what our plan is to come back to you in November with a plan of recommendations, draft recommendations to provide you that input. Then in the time frame between that November meeting and the second meeting in December, we would ask the board to use your discretion to have workshops, conduct workshops on this issue, whatever forum you would like, to give the community your feedback, your input, to hear input directly from the communities as well, and recommendations from our committee. You would then feed us that input back in the end of November, beginning of December time frame, and then we would come to you as well in the second meeting in December to look for a final vote. We're looking at our initial responsibility of $400,000 to $500,000 a school, approximately 10 schools, for the budget reduction. However, in the process, we began to realize that the closing of schools carries with it also the potential for reframing of Prop S dollars. As we look at whole site modernizations that may be scheduled for some of the schools that may not need to be done, and they range from the very, very smallest schools, the $2 to $2.5 million, to the largest schools that are not high schools per se, about $8 million per school. That makes the financial benefit to the district much greater. We estimate it could be as high as $35 million that the district obviously cannot use for instructional programs, but that could be used for other projects of a facilities nature, and we would recommend keeping those dollars within the same cluster and being able to use them for other purposes. We've been thinking about, well, if we recommend closing schools, what would we do with those schools? There's been questions about that. Well, perhaps in 2 years or so, we may need some administrative sites, some places to put administration, especially as the next month we'll be coming back to you with some considerations of the overall real estate perspective of the district, which includes this building and what may be able to be done with this building of an investment nature. And that would require us to vacate this building for several years. And so we don't have money to lease, because we can't go into Mission Valley and lease a big building down there. We have no money for that. But we would have possibly some vacant schools where the administration could go in, and that would make the changes in this building possible. Also looking at co-locations of charter schools. This year we've looked at co-locating charter schools with our schools, and we're thinking that it would be possible for us to co-locate 2 to 3 charter schools at a given site where they would be together under Prop 39. Understanding that if we close a campus, that campus does not automatically have to be offered to charter schools under Prop 39, but this would enable us to designate some for that particular purpose. And then we could also look at the long-term investment of a particular property or even the sale of that property for the future. Our preference would be to look at these properties from an investment perspective rather than a sales perspective, because that's a one-time use of money. It's not a long-term investment strategy where we have income that will come to us over a period of time. So, as I said, we've been meeting since January. We've looked at closures, configuration changes, consolidations, movements. We've also looked at, we decided that we'd go outside the purview a little bit in the sense of what the policy 3113 recommends, and look at where do we perhaps need programs or need schools in underserved parts of our district. So at this point we're looking at coming back to you with some recommendations, understanding that we have no money to fund those right now. But we've talked about doing some things with another bond, perhaps, and so we thought we would make recommendations to you as well related to areas that we think are underserved, and with the idea of a quality school in every neighborhood where we think that we may need to add some programs or add some schools. And we are making a commitment to you that we will engage in a full and transparent discussion to get input from stakeholders all across the district. Now, what have we looked at? What are the data points? And I've included in this item probably 8 or 9 different documents that we won't go into tonight, but are samples of the data that we've looked at. We've looked at the grade configurations in schools, enrollment trends over 10 years, facility capacities, and we've tried to correlate that to neighborhood schools where there is capacity, space. Capacity versus enrollment, a percentage of utilization. We looked a lot at the residents. Resident students in that boundary, resident enrollment of the school, the market share. Are the students choosing who are resident students to go to those schools? What schools have very, very large non-resident populations, both from within the cluster itself and outside of the cluster? So we're trying to do, what we've looked at is correlation. If we see schools that have very low capacity, schools that have around them that have capacity to receive the students. If we look at schools that have very high non-resident populations, that may not be particularly for magnet programs, because then there's a reason that we're bringing students in for a particular program or purpose. We're looking at API scores, then we looked at API growth, and we're also looking at the dollars, the cost. Our cost in unrestricted dollars per school varies widely. So we've looked at that as a factor as well. If you tonight authorize us to proceed, we're going to look tomorrow at a brand new measure at our meeting tomorrow that we have not looked at before, which is trying to grasp dollars spent, unrestricted dollars spent, and academic performance. That's an exciting concept that we're going to have our first hard look at tomorrow. And you do have some sample data there in board docs. We'd like to begin right away meeting with clusters. We think that this is going to be a difficult challenge to integrate with the current cluster meeting schedules, because there will be lots of things on those items. Lots of different programs and agenda items. We believe we're going to need at least 3 hours an evening to go into depth and have a good discussion, breakout sessions, and really do some valuable discussion. So we understand we're going to have at least 2 of these a week where the community is invited to come in, and we want their input. We will give them our initial data. I mean, we've been meeting since January. We're going to give them a little bit of a head start in work, but then we want to hear from them which schools they would suggest that in their cluster that be closed. And we know that that's a very difficult, very challenging, and emotional concept, so we're not taking it lightly. But we're also looking at, is there an interest in a concept such as cluster subsidizing of schools? Do they see a need for grade level configuration changes? We'll give them our data, we'll give them our draft recommendations, and then we'll let them give us feedback as well. We have a committee, the Utilization of Excess School Property Advisory Committee. We're going to ask them to participate with us, meet with us, give us advice and direction as well. That is a committee that already exists, and we think we can save some time, get this done if we utilize that committee. The third point in this is very, very important, we don't want to leave out. If it looks like we're going to be bringing recommendations to you as a board, in draft recommendations in November, we want to get together with the schools that will be impacted and meet with those staffs and prepare them. No surprises for anyone in this process. So we've been meeting, and we believe at this point, based on all of those different factors that we've looked at, we gave you some sample spreadsheets. We ranked different schools based on each one of those columns in those spreadsheets and tried to correlate which school was high in this category, low in this category, that made them candidates for closure. And we believe that we've identified 10 of our 16 clusters in which we have the potential for closures. We've identified 1, 2, 3 schools within that cluster that could be options for being closed. We will meet with these clusters, we'll present those options to them, share the data with them, and then listen to them for other schools they may in their own wisdom and their own knowledge of their own geography, recommend as well. So we'll be dealing specifically with these 10 clusters related to closings. Then the other 6 clusters, we'll engage them as well, because we want to make this more broad-based than just closing. We want to get their input on program movement, grade level configurations, those kinds of non-closure recommendations. So in August, you approved the modified school closure policy. We've been operating under that guideline and the work that we've been doing, and we're basically suggesting to you tonight that three additional items for your consideration. Number one, that you authorize our committee to continue its work towards the right sizing of schools, and that right sizing basically deals with grade level configurations, more so than I don't know that we've recommended in any case that there's 300 students in a school and we think it should go to 150 or 700 in that sense. But we are looking at grade level configurations. We're looking at program consolidation, program movement in some cases, and we certainly want to take in the input of the cluster. So that would be number one. You would just say to us, keep going. And number two is a step where you're saying, we want you to go out now to these clusters that have been identified, begin meeting with them. We would begin scheduling tomorrow cluster meetings with the area superintendents, engaging them and the cluster leadership at each cluster, and looking at having meetings between now and November with all 16 clusters. In fact, I would envision that we would have to have multiple meetings with individual clusters. I don't think we can expect to have these kind of recommendations from them in one evening. That would not be fair. Then recommendation number 3 is, our thinking was that you will have our report in October of where we are, what we're looking at, and we expect to be giving you some school recommendations at that point. You will have a first reading per the guidelines 3113 and per what we think is your preference. You will have then opportunity in the end of November, the beginning of December, to meet, confer with the clusters, confer with community input, confer with our committee, the staff, provide us your input, your feedback, before we come back to you with a final recommendation list. It's kind of, in a sense, I've been thinking today, it's kind of like what we do in our budget process, where we have a first reading of the budget, you've given us input, you'll give us more input, and then we would come back with a second reading and ask you for a decision. Our suggestion, just based on our knowledge of this, the BRAC concept that was done in I believe in the 80s, during the Reagan administration, was that the legislative body approved the list as an entirety, which makes it a situation where we don't say, this school but not that school, and that school but not this school, and we get into all of that. We will have plenty of opportunity for that feedback. We want that feedback, those discussions. But we envision those occurring with the clusters, those occurring with the board in a first reading, and then in subsequent workshops as well. You also have a timeline here that kind of breaks down what I've indicated to you, that takes us from now really until August with that transition. Don't forget that transition time is very, very important. Both for our budget department, our finance people, to integrate the changes, for staff to get placed, for that whole process to happen, and for schools to adjust to the new reality, both the schools that may be closing and the schools that would be receiving. So November 29th, we would look for a first reading, and then December 13th, a final second reading. And we will be busy over the next few months, out and about in the evening, working on meeting and engaging with the clusters. I won't bother going through this one. We've already gone through that. I'll take questions. Any comments, questions that you have. You may choose to break down the 3 items to vote, each one separately or together, or make a 4th or a 5th. That's certainly your prerogative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stover. We've got 2 speakers, Becky Breedlove and Amy Monroe.
As part of the cluster meeting at Crawford last night, we reviewed the slides that you've presented this evening, and I want to share a few of the comments. We also were very appreciative to get the reports last spring that showed all the market analysis. That's very telling, important, and it's really good for us to have that at the cluster level. One of the things that we ask is, who is on the committee? And we would like to see documents when it says the committee. We would like to see the names of those 20 people, because we don't know who's representing us. Tonight, Phil, I think you said a minimum of 10 schools orally, but on page 2 you say up to 10 schools. In terms of the page, the criteria, also on page 2 you clearly say that enrollment is not the only factor, yet when we look at page 6 where you list several of the factors, I know you have more factors than this, many of those have to do with enrollment, and only one that I see listed has to do, or 2 have to do with student achievement, and that's API and API growth. And as we're looking at schools, I would hope that we would be able to look at other factors that point to achievement and growth and change. Perhaps AP course taking changes, perhaps attendance. A through G, though notoriously is famous for being flawed and under what it really is as far as college acceptances go, that's another thing that I think we could look at. We can look at graduation rates. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I think you addressed this, it wasn't in the slide, but you addressed it briefly, is on page 8. It was really apparent to those of us in the Crawford cluster that there were clusters missing from the list. And those that came to our mind at first, I guess there's 6, but we immediately thought of Scripps, La Jolla, Mira Mesa, and San Diego High. And our area superintendent, as well as our trustee who was at our meeting, attempted to give us some rationale for that, but I know that we are going to be anxious to hear more about that, because in past years we have heard of small schools, especially elementary schools, in some of those areas that are not on this hit list of 10 that have been slated for closure. So we're curious as to why they're not on this particular list. The timeline also, it was confusing to us when it was explained last night. When you talk about coming to clusters to get input, it almost feels like there's already the list of 10 or optional 3 or 4. So the sooner we can know what the analysis suggests, the better we'll be able to give you input, rather than doing that blindly and then not hearing about schools till much later. Thank you.
Good recommendation. Thank you.
My name is Amy Monroe. I'm here with the Mission Bay Cluster Schools, specifically Crown Point Junior Music Academy. You've seen my face in June when we had to fight for our magnet and music funds. I wasn't coming here tonight planning on speaking. I was mostly coming to listen, but some of the things that you spoke to and we've talked about earlier this evening, they really struck me, and I just wanted to discuss those with you. School closure has been something that's been rumored a lot for years, for decades, and our school in particular is one that sort of falls victim to the rumor mill. It seems like this is a little bit more serious, and so I'm trying to get the parents and staff at our school to take this more seriously. But one of the things that we spent something like 20 minutes tonight talking about was closing the achievement gap, yet that's not in your criteria when you're looking at the schools that are slated for closure. Our school is state and nationally recognized for doing better at closing the achievement gap than anyone else. So I'd like for that to be considered, if you don't mind. You also mentioned looking at canyons and highways and that sort of thing. With the closure of a school like Crown Point, you suddenly leave the Mission Bay cluster without a school south of Grand Avenue. That's a little bizarre considering how much of our community comes from south of Grand. Mr. Barrera, this evening you talked about doing more with less and congratulating the district and the schools and everybody who puts all of their time and energy in. I want to caution you in that congratulations because there's a lag in that cycle. We're doing more with less, but because we had more. And I'm concerned that in the coming years, the not too distant future, we're going to see the effects of these closures and these budget cuts and what's being done to our schools. I'm also concerned, Mission Bay and Pacific Beach in particular, we're making a huge community effort toward drawing more families and more community to our community. And if that happens and we grow in the number of children present in our community and you've closed one of our schools, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we're going to be overcrowded. Then what do we do? So I just think there's more to this picture. But lastly, of all of the things, with all of the rumor, we lose families year after year because of the rumor of closure. So if you're going to do this, do it. Be done with it. And if you don't do it this year, don't bring it up next year. This needs to get handled, and it needs to get handled now. Because I got a lot of things in my children's lifetime to fight for, and spending night after night standing before you fighting and fighting and fighting really shouldn't be on the list. All of that being said, thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Best of luck to you. And our cluster meeting is September 19th, this coming Monday. We'd love to see you. Thanks.
Just for one clarification, we do have the list of the committee members posted on board docs, so that that is public information and can be seen on board docs.
Right. Board members, Ms. Jackson.
And you are adjusting your membership, is that correct?
We are very open to having new members on our committee. Absolutely.
One of the concerns that I shared yesterday with Mr. Stover is that 4 of the 6 area superintendents are on that committee, and all 6 should be there. Because if we're going to talk about changing and grade configuration and modifying, then all the area supes should be part of that committee, and it should be not a volunteer effort on their part. They need to be part of the committee. I think Mr. Stover, before I even make comments, can you please comment on the question? I mean, we had several questions last night, but on the ones that are missing from the list, can you again publicly explain why you have La Jolla, Lincoln, Mira Mesa, San Diego, Scripps Ranch, and University City not on the list, please?
Yeah. There are six. La Jolla, Lincoln, Mira Mesa, San Diego, Scripps Ranch, and University City clusters that in the committee's work we were not able to identify schools that met a sufficient number of the criteria to get the vote of the committee to be considered for closure. Anywhere in the district you'll find a school. Almost every school will have one of the criteria that it would score low on or high on, which would be a negative. However, our determination was we wanted to look at schools that fit the pattern of at least, I believe, 5 of the criteria that were scored in a direction that would cause us to believe that there would be reason to consider those schools for closure. These 6 clusters did not have schools that met enough of the criteria to be considered for that purpose. We then even looked at expanding that a bit and seeing if there was anything we had missed, but we decided to stick to our criteria, stick to the number of criteria that needed to be met, and that was those criteria were present in 10 of the clusters, and then what we are choosing calling atypical schools, which are schools that are not represented in a geographical cluster.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think I would have liked to have seen that information, and all I can think of right now is that when we do the interview process, they have a sheet, that each person fills out and they put numbers on and they do some kind of checklist. And so in the end, there is a physical document that if someone comes and says, you know, how did this person get selected or whatever, they'll say, here are the points that they were awarded. Okay, I don't see that happening here. My concern is that the criteria for closing schools, I don't feel comfortable, I'm only speaking for myself here, delegating it to these 20 people. I think that criteria should be approved by the board so that everyone knows what the criteria is. We know, many of us know on the board, how passionate people become about the closure of schools. And it's very difficult to explain why a school was picked when you didn't even know what the criteria, I mean you meaning us the board members, didn't even know what the criteria was or how the criteria was determined. So yesterday my comments to you that I would share with my peers was in looking at your calendar, I didn't see anywhere where the board approved the criteria prior to the selection being made. What I understood from my reading, and I read this a couple of times and I had people read it to me, so make sure that I understood what was being said, was that we're going to authorize you tonight to go out and hold cluster meetings and get cluster input. You decided some things already. Whatever they are, we haven't seen those things, okay? But you've decided some things already. That you're not going to go out to the clusters and say, you know what, Morris cluster, we decided to do this in your cluster. Give us some input. And you're going to get it together and come back and give us an update and say, you know, based upon what we think, this committee of 20 or 22, and what we heard from the cluster, this is our recommendation, okay? And you're going to bring it to us, and we're going to have to take it either all of it or none of it, all right? And my concern now is certainly that somewhere in this timeline needs to be where the board that's responsible for this decides what that criteria is, so that the public has input to what that criteria is. Because I agree, closing the achievement gap should be part of the criteria. But I think that is a decision that is made by the board, not by 20 staff members. No offense to any of them. Okay. Secondly, you know, I think that once that criteria, and that it should be done fairly quickly. We have a lot of meetings scheduled, so maybe you want to intercept this, if the board members agree, earlier, so that when you're going out to the clusters and people are asking, because when people ask us, doesn't matter if it's me or you or the committee, what the criteria is, we need to be very clear what criteria that we're going to use and what the ranking for it is. If we say enrollment is part of it, is that a large part of it? Is the API a large part of it? Are they all weighted equal? Are we giving equal access to all of those things? And so my concern was that between the first reading and the second reading, because what you said in the memo to us was it was all or none. And so there wasn't any opportunity for us to say, well, can you go back and reconsider, because those are two meetings just right back to back. So it's like you accept it on the 29th, we're going to bring it back on the 13th to finalize it. And so this board member has concerns. My motion would be this, if I could make a motion at this particular point. I would approve that item number 2 in your list, to go out and begin community discussions related to school closures after the criteria has been defined. I think the board should really define that criteria before you go out to the clusters.
Okay. If I can just respond to that point. Our criteria were drawn from Policy 3113 that the board did approve last year. So in looking at the criteria we used, our assumption was that item D3 in Policy 3113 did get board approval. So therefore, those are the criteria that we used to determine what we were looking at. So if I can just read it to you real quickly. Enrollment history and forecast, resident and non-resident enrollment patterns, resident population trends, achievement trends, including birth information and potential for significant residential development or redevelopment, program and excess capacity information, operating costs, special programs, including non-academic programs operating at district sites, and alternative options for students affected by any changes of use. Those are the criteria that we utilize, and they come straight from the school utilization reconfiguration closure planning document approved by the board last year. Yes. Yeah.
Dr. Evans.
Yes. I know this is dicey. We say go out and do this, and the second you start doing it, we can kind of pick it apart. Sure. I know the clusters are going to be very energized on this. I had this full presentation last night also at a cluster meeting, so there's not any delay in terms of the clusters paying attention. And in fact, it may result in the clusters getting a lot more organized this year and a lot more participation from the community, maybe one side effect of what we're doing, which is actually a good thing. And one of the things that I was saying to the group last night was really this concept of we don't know what our shortfall is going to be exactly, and we need to turn every stone over and put everything on the table. And the issue, of course, is we're looking at perhaps $5 million here. $5 million closing schools or $5 million doing something else, as opposed to just is it a good idea to close schools. One example would be $5 million, 16, might be as many as 70 or 80 teachers. Just doing quick math in my head, which is about the number of teachers for class size reduction we had done at one grade level, which would affect the whole district. So, we have to weigh it out, and it's not just in isolation. It's going to be in comparison to other things that are going on in the district. But we have to consider everything, and I think in line with what one of the speakers said this evening, the point is to look at this, to look at it carefully, and to make a decision up or down, and if we're not going to do it, really to put it away, and so it doesn't come up every year, because we're looking at this as a long-term plan, and this is what we need for the next few years, and if we're not going to do it, then we need to be really clear about that. And that goes to the point about cost in terms of, and we a couple of years ago when we went through this, the whole savings calculation is a very tricky thing in terms of what do we save. Obviously the teachers and most of the staff move on to another school because we have the same number of students in the district. There's some administrative savings, there's some utility savings. But another issue for each school, each school would be different in terms of if you come up with $450,000 is we also have to subtract from that potential costs that are going to happen. If it's there was an example of one school that was next to the La Mesa district, and so if it was closed and they all went to La Mesa district, there's this huge drop in funds through district. Where the school is located, are there other private schools nearby? Are there charter schools nearby? Would we, have a net loss in terms of the number of kids in the district, which would, in some ways, could potentially cancel out a lot of the $450,000 of savings. So, for each case, that's going to have to be projected and carefully calculated. I also was looking at the issue that was brought up about the number of clusters that are listed here and the ones that are not listed. And I think part of the issue here is we need to take obviously a really long-term view, because we're cutting back on transportation. Schools that are now over-enrolled will potentially be under-enrolled in the future, and vice versa. And I know that you're taking that into consideration a lot, but I picked up a little of some assumptions in terms of certain magnet schools, because I am certain that there are schools in the clusters that are not included that have a significant number of students who attend them from outside, which meaning that the number of local residents is fairly low, and there would be a possibility in some of those fairly small clusters of combining a couple of schools if you reduced it to only resident students. And so this is an important issue in terms of how do you take into consideration the board view on this. Last year when we worked on transportation, we basically only, I'm simplifying this, we only really protected 4 magnet schools, a couple of language schools and a couple of music schools, because of their unique kind of one-of-a-kind nature and located in 2 different parts, 2 music academy or performing arts academies and 2 language academies in different parts of the district in terms of transportation. So we were protecting them, whereas we weren't necessarily, I mean, that's a discussion we have to have, but we weren't necessarily saying we're protecting other magnet schools that are just moving people around. So we have to, the other thing about transportation, the limits we did was we didn't want radical changes this year. So if cutting transportation back too much was going to too dramatically affect a school in terms of cutting down too much or increasing too much, we weren't going to do that. But that doesn't mean we're not moving in that direction. So on the criteria issue, I think we need to really be careful about not making any assumptions about what kinds of programs are going to be saved. And I think in doing that, there might be possibilities of looking at closures in some of the other clusters also. One other point, I mean, I think we have closed one school. I mean, we did close North Park Elementary after the last whole round, and I think that was one case where it was just generally viewed by everybody involved that it was the best decision. I think that's kind of the right sizing, the realigning, the best use of facilities of the district. It wasn't just strictly a financial thing, but the school was so small, the program that we moved in needed to be there. So I think that's a good example of a successful school closure. And finally, I mean, I do support in general the idea of this BRAC concept. So we're not just each of us picking out, and I want to save this school and I want to save that school, and we end up with nothing. But I think to do that, the general direction you had was, about 10 schools, about $5 million. I mean, I would hope that as the group goes through this, that you would come up with a recommendation that might be $3 million and it might be $8 million, but it is what really makes sense, which is really the right thing to do in terms of the right sizing the district and maintaining programs and readjusting and so forth, as opposed to just, we're charged by the board to go out and get this much money and this number of schools, because you might find some additional ones that you don't have here. You might find that some that you are looking at here are not reasonable to do. And then I think it's presenting to the board, this is our best professional recommendation in terms of what we should do with the long-term interests of the district in mind and the communities about school closures. So I think at that point, it really should be an up or down vote. And again, going back to that point, if this is not something that it's just too much pain for too little gain, and we set aside, then we're done with it. But I think rather than just kind of doing it in a piecemeal way, it just all falls apart. So I support that idea, but I just don't want the committee to be locked into the idea of exactly this is what you will come up with.
I think that we ought to put everything on the table. We have to look at all of our options. I do have doubts as to whether or not we will realize the savings that we're projecting. That's a real concern of mine. The other thing is the criterion. If we have an elementary school, K-5, and they're performing they're a 900-plus school, that staff is working together with the community, the leadership in that school is working well with the parents and helping to support the teachers and the staff at that site, I just can't imagine that we would consider putting them on the list. Rather, I would think that we would want to think about the alignment piece of the committee work to see if we could add pre-K to 6 or K to 6 to keep those successful leadership schools, those successful groups and teams continuing to work together. But then there's the other side. If we have two small schools within 2 blocks of each other, and half of the classrooms at both schools are empty, I don't know if that makes sense to keep both of them open. So those are the kinds of details that I want to look forward to evaluating with the proposal. I am kind of a little taken aback that we didn't have input into the opportunity to appoint anybody to the committee. I was not involved. Granted, through Sheila Jackson's comments that we would have an area superintendent from all the affected areas participate in the committee. However, if there's a school in Subdistrict B that the voters and the parents and the community don't think should be on the consent agenda list, I would like the opportunity to have the ability to have a representative on that committee to fight for that school in Subdistrict B. I'm very concerned that Subdistrict B is going to get hit disproportionately hard with this closure list. I'm very concerned about that. And I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's right. And that's why I think that each board member should at least have the opportunity to have representation on the committee to be a part of creating this final list.
I guess I'll make a motion, and then just so we get things going, and then have some comments. I'll move staff recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I just want to, Sheila, were you earlier making a motion for numbers 2 and 3?
It was not a second.
No, it was 1 and 2 basically, but it was not second.
Yeah, and that was before Mr. Stover clarified that we're using the criteria that the board, the previous board, your board, previous board approved for school closure, that then we modified in August.
Okay, because I don't know that we actually considered your motion. Do you want to withdraw your motion?
No, it wasn't a second, but I'm sorry.
Mr.
There wasn't
Chairman,
a second, but my motion was that we look at item number 2, which authorizes us to go to the community now, but with the stipulation that we are able to discuss the criteria prior to that.
Okay.
That was my motion.
Okay, and is there a second to Ms. Jackson's motion? Okay. Mr. Barnett?
I will move 1, 2, and 3 with the understanding that the criteria that are used is based on the previous board's development of the school closure criteria, which was the timeline of which was modified by this board in August. So, and that's just to get this moving, and then I'd have some comments about the process. So I move staff recommendation.
Is there a second to Mr. Barnett's motion to move staff recommendation?
I'll second that with the stipulation that all of that Ms. Jackson mentioned, that all of the area superintendents be on the committee so that everyone is participating.
Okay.
I will amend the motion to include that.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion and a second. I've got a couple of questions. Did you want to...
I have some comments, but I can wait to your
questions.
Go ahead. First of all, I don't think at this point we are looking at, or should say, we're closing schools simply to solve a next year's budget problem. I don't think we may be at that point in another year or two where it's truly an emergency measure in order to balance the budget. That doesn't mean that staff is not including the savings or potential savings in the budget strategy, but that in itself is not the reason, in my view, to pursue this now. Why would we want to close schools? This district does a lot of amazing things. We have incredible magnet programs, we have language schools, we have IB programs, and we have we have class size reduction across the district, in the lower grades at least, if not my kids' high school class. So we have all these things that have been priorities of this district for decades and have become the norm. Well, unfortunately, the funding has been reduced from the state, and the previous board has had to cut hundreds of millions of dollars. But we still want these things. They're part of the culture. So the reality is, and I made this very clear in the campaign when I ran at every forum I went to, that we need to look at right-sizing the district in order to meet our goals as a district. And that means if we want magnet schools within the district, they're important, then we need to make sure we have a multi-year plan to afford that. If we want language schools, we have to be able to afford that. If we want IB programs, because instead of just this, what's been happening last year, and it's going to happen in next year's budget, we're degrading these programs by cutting away a few million in the magnet program and IB and language, and and all schools. So it's important to know, though, that schools that have these extra benefits, they're actually being subsidized by the school district at large. If you have a magnet program that has, in the past at least, had additional money per student, they were being subsidized by the big pot. And the district made a policy recommendation, said we believe these schools are important, but they are being subsidized. If you have a school that's inefficient, it has, as Mr. Beiser said, if you have a couple blocks away, and we have examples of that, of schools with small numbers, and you keep them open, then who's paying for that? The district overall. We're taking money from the big pot, which we want to use for these issues. So to me, this crisis forces us to look at the opportunities to right-size the district. Now, that doesn't mean, as a parent, when the mother of my children and I decided where we were going to live when our first daughter was born, we decided that based on the school in the neighborhood. I mean, that was a key decision, and I understand how critical that is to parents. But the other issue is, beyond the savings, is beyond what Mr. Stover mentioned about, they would free up Prop S money for the remaining schools, and I hope that would stay in the clusters that are sacrificing. It also would free up general fund maintenance money or state maintenance money. If we have a list of schools and their maintenance needs, if you have schools that are not going to be open, they're going to be off the list. They're going to be, so it does save other money, and in the long term, what is the value of these properties? And once again, we shouldn't close schools just because they will be valued as real estate assets or other reasons. That's not the reason to close it. But as we are looking at long-term sustainability of this district to pay for what we want, we need to generate more revenues within the district that we control. And that means reducing costs and increasing revenues. And that means using the excess property we currently have more effectively in generating revenues. And if we close other schools, look at what the opportunities are as well. This has to be part of a big picture, multi-year discussion. So I think the bottom line is, and comment maybe Mr. Beiser said, I believe actually right now that my district will probably be impacted more than any others based on what the closures. But you know what? We need to do the right thing for the school district overall and our sub-districts, and that means making some tough decisions and at least looking at the facts. Part of this process, and this is critical, is that, and Mr. Stover pointed out, but I think we need to reiterate this, is that the clusters, if a school X is being proposed being closed in cluster Y, that the community should have input, and say it's an elementary school, of some of the issues like was mentioned tonight. Well, if you close this school, then it's the only school in this location, or the only school that offers this. The cluster should have direct input on which facility would be closed. And secondly, if a cluster decides that elementary school X or middle school Y is so critical to our community fabric, our character, our culture, then that cluster should have the opportunity to subsidize it. And that means going to the other schools. It means going to the high school and asking for $100,000 a year. It means going to the middle school and asking for $50,000, and maybe the elementary schools. Because once again, the cluster should subsidize it, not the district overall, because we just can't afford it anymore. So this process, I think it's critical to get out to the clusters, get the information out there, and get the people in the community to say what their values are in reflecting this process, and then come back and then look at this once again as a long-term right-sizing district decision, not simply to potentially save money in one budget year. So that's why I think we need to go ahead with this process.
Okay. So a couple of things. The achievement criteria, I think we need to be very careful about the way that we put that together, because obviously, when we talk about achievement, if we're in one part of the district and there's an API level of 900, and we're in another part of the district and there's an API level of 750, the 750 school might be achieving really at a higher rate than the 900 school, depending on the challenges of who the kids are, who the students are. So I think we need to obviously take that into account. I agree with a lot of what Mr. Barnett was saying. In particular, that this can't just be a solution to solve our budget crisis for 1 year. This really has to be about thinking, about where the district's going to be over the next 5 to 10 years. I am concerned, I think, about the BRAC concept, and the reason that I'm concerned, I get the politics of that. It's in a sense easier, for all 5 of us to vote, on an entire list of schools. In a sense, there's some political cover for doing that. If you're, for instance, voting to. If your vote means that a school in your district, in your sub-district, is being closed. I'm a little... I got to say I'm not comfortable with that process, because I think, like Mr. Barnett said, I think it's the responsibility of each of us to just do the right thing, to just vote the right way. And if that means that... closing a school in our district is harder to do than closing a school in somebody else's district, although all 5 of us represent the entire district. We gotta bite the bullet and do that. The bar for closing schools, though, I think has to be very high, and I worry about us sort of mixing criteria and crossing lines. The example that Mr. Beiser talked about, and I think North Park was obviously a clear example of that, is a school that it just doesn't make sense, to keep open. In the case of North Park, we had Garfield, on the same street, a few blocks north. We had Jefferson just a few blocks south. The school had been losing population every year. It just didn't make sense to keep North Park going as a separate school, and we identified a better use for that site. In a case like and still very difficult decision for everybody involved, but in a case like North Park, and if we look at sort of where the student population is going to be over the next decade, and we say it's not going to there's not going to be any increased demand for a school at North Park, that fits a criteria that for me would say, right, that makes sense. We should close that school. There's just not a lot of sense in keeping it open. But when we've got schools that are really performing, especially a unique function in the district, and we start to close those schools, that's where, to me, we're starting to really just denigrate the quality of public education in our district. So part of what obviously we have to look at is, well, where's that program or that function going to pick up, and our kids going to have access to the quality of that program if it's if we close this school and it's picked up in another location. And I mean, that's we got to really take that. We have to really think that through. It's not so easy that we just close the school and we move the program, and the program is going to be the same quality. So I worry when we start to close schools that provide something unique and something important to students in our district. That's where I think we're really, that's to me a very different situation than a school like North Park, where those kids really probably in the end, we're getting more opportunities, by transferring to Jefferson or to Garfield. And it's why I'm, again, not comfortable, just as one board member, with the BRAC concept, because I don't want to vote on a list of 10 schools or 8 schools or whatever it is, knowing that I really don't agree with closing 3 of those schools on that list, but because it's an entire list and it's sort of you voted up or down, that doesn't feel right to me, and it actually doesn't feel like a responsible decision for each board member to make, to say, well, okay, there are 5 schools on this list that are in that sort of North Park category, and they make sense to close. But in order to close those, I got to close, 4 other schools that don't make any sense to close. It feels like we're abdicating responsibility when we do that kind of thing. And if it's just because, well, it's politically easier, to vote for the list of 9, even though we know that 4, go against our conscience. So I'm actually not going to support the motion because the BRAC concept is included. I think we got to vote up or down each school, and we got to make that decision. And if it ends up that board members just can't pull it together to make a tough decision, in the time that I've been on the board, there's been 1 school in our district that's closed, and it's right in my neighborhood. So if board members aren't able to do that, then board members aren't acting responsibly. But I'd much rather, go through, school by school, make sure that, that bar to close the school is very high, where we're saying this just doesn't make sense. Rather than sort of voting.
President, I'll amend my motion because I think it's because there's great symbolism in what this board is doing and is part of a broad. I would rather, if you would support the motion, if I removed item 3 from it, then I think that's a better message to send to the public.
Okay.
So it would be the same motion with the additional area soups that Ms. Jackson recommended, but its 1 and 2 at this point. If the seconder agrees.
I would support that amending it, because basically, as Ms. Brewer was talking and thinking about, the concept is to come up with what the staff has determined. That's why I said not necessarily 10, but coming up with a proposal about what really makes sense to close. But I also don't think it's right. I agree to just at that point just totally let go if it's even like 4 out of 5 that I agree with and just adding on 1. So I think that's reasonable to have them package it that way and on the basis of what's reasonable, and then we'll deal with the fallout of the decision.
And I appreciate that. And part of the obviously part of the if part of the analysis is, well, we need to close, if we're going to close this school, then we also need to close this school, or it doesn't make any sense, okay, then that should be part of the analysis. But, I think we need to understand why we're closing each school.
And just one other, maybe it's just a detail, but in terms of, we're talking about the various clusters that are included. I think that if you look at the one basic criterion of are there enough resident students in a school by itself to support that school, is or not. I'm not saying that's the only. There are a lot of issues taken into account, but I do believe that there are schools in the other clusters that have a high transportation component, and so I just don't want that. They may be at full capacity and great schools and all that kind of stuff. And there may be other reasons not to consider closing them, but I just want to make sure that there wasn't some assumption built in there about what kinds of schools need to be protected, because I think we're back to the concept, everything's on the table. So I would just say, I just make the comment, I think that in approving this, that doesn't mean that you can't look beyond this list of what's here, of the clusters. Just that comment.
Yeah, Ms. Jackson.
This is going to be extremely difficult conversation, and it's going to be, we've had things that were time-consuming before, and I'm wondering whether or not there will be an opportunity And Mr. Beiser mentioned earlier, we appreciate the staff that is on the committee. Is there an opportunity to have community people on the committee? But maybe having, I want to say, and this is just an idea, I don't know if this will even work or not, but having one of those meetings here for that particular cluster. So let's say that Mira Mesa's cluster has come up with a great concept of how they want to reshape themselves, that they have it here so that all 5 board members can hear it. And then what we're doing is we're balancing that out with what the staff recommendation is. So we are truly then getting the input from the community. And not that we're not just saying that this is what staff is recommending based upon the input, but it gives us a kind of a balance of it, because when people come here, other people are watching and listening and looking, and it gives more credibility to the fact that people had an opportunity, that we went there once, that the staff went there, presented all the documentation that they have for them, and then they had a chance to come here and have a discussion or say, you know what, we have some good ideas and we talk about the resizing, we talk about the shifting of programs. There may be some lively things that come out of that discussion that may not be part of the actual school closure, but something else that we can look, because you are correct. This is not just a one-time thing. It should be looking over a continuum. And maybe some of the things can't take place now, but being able to present it, and it makes the community feel really empowered. Because what I also hear from the clusters is, what kind of authority do we have? What kind of juice do we have? And I think the ability to say, in one of the most critical decisions that we have to make, we're allowing you some time to come down and, speak, you share your concerns, your wishes, whatever, with the board. And maybe it's a, 15-minute or 10-minute, timeline on them, but at least it gives them that opportunity. And so I just throw that out as a suggestion,
So I wonder if we could do this. Why don't we vote on Mr. Barnett's motion first, and then let's consider.
Continue?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a motion and a second. Please vote. Okay, and then Ms. Jackson and Mr. Beiser both, talked about board members appointing members to the committee. Does somebody want to actually make a motion to that effect?
Can I just make one comment?
Yeah,
I think we are at a point now where we are giving these to big committees. We're giving these to the clusters. I mean, now we're saying the board has said that for a variety of reasons, we need to right-size this district, and your cluster is looking at whatever the specific issues would be there. And now we're saying to this cluster community, you tell us, what we've missed, what's wrong, what to change, what to balance. I mean, I don't really, what does the other committee have to do anymore at this point? It seems to me, now we're putting it out to the people in the community, the clusters, and saying, okay, you have a role in this decision-making process. We've made the larger policy decision, but you have a role. We're not just saying you have to take down your throat closing school X for this reason, but we're letting you help develop how we make that decision. And so I don't really know why we even need the committee anymore. Aren't we beyond that?
Well, Mr. Server, do you want to
sure
address
about that? Let me clarify what I was saying, and then you can address it. All I am saying is that part of this committee is saying that we're going to go out to clusters to get cluster input. What we also know is that when you go out, and I think Ms. Breedlow's comment earlier was that they don't have the information yet. So you go out there the first night and you present the information, and you're asking them to give you input on something that they just received. And as a board member, I know how difficult that is, because sometimes we just get things and then you're asking us to say, hey, let's go do it. And all I'm asking is that let's have another meeting with them, but they can provide input. Not saying that they're making the decision, but that second bit of input is in a forum that they know that, board members are listening, people are listening, and so it gives them the ability to feel that their input is valued. So not trying to take the committee and enlarge it, and I think if a motion is made for us to add 1 or 2 people to it, that's okay. But my comment really wasn't about the enlargement of the committee, as it was about the ability to say to clusters, this is one of the most important things that this board is going to do. we're right-sizing, we're shifting programs around, we're going to give you lots of data, we want your input, and we're willing to either come and listen. I mean, I think we all can come and listen, or come down to the Ed Center and let's hear what you're interested in. And I think that's very powerful. So, and I didn't say we had to do it. I just offered it up as a suggestion, for the staff, because it's okay for us to say we want people's input. The people want to know, well, how are we getting their input? If the staff goes out and gives them information, how are we receiving that input? Does the board hear that input? Does it hear all of the input? Is the input filtered? We're about building trust. I think that's one of the ways that we can build trust.
I understand the concept. I guess I think there is a logistical issue.
Exactly.
I mean, I would plan on visiting as many cluster meetings as I could. I think the cluster meetings could be more, and it would not be one time, as Mr. Stover said, and I think they would be very in-depth. I think if we had a parade of people from every cluster coming through here, that it would be pretty laborious in terms of this type of a forum that wouldn't get into as much detail as you could at each cluster level. So I think that, and I think we expanded the original committee, which is already a lot of its work is kind of there, by making sure that every area superintendent was on it. I think that, I would just suggest, I think, the staff can kind of take into consideration what she said. I don't really support a motion to mandate we do it a certain way.
Our concept. One last thing, sorry, maybe to help Ms. Jackson get what I think Ms. Jackson's trying to do is maybe at least the board update or the first reading, there's a workshop element instead of just at the board agenda. So that way, we can say we're going to spend several hours on it, on just the recommendations. The clusters can come down, participate, and then it meets at we can have it at a dais here or wherever, and that way I think it would meet your desires without...
So the motion would be that we would have, that at that particular time period towards the end of November, we would have a workshop, not just a first reading.
Well, there's even the first one, the board update, maybe, or whatever the staff.
Some point.
One of those would be a workshop.
Some point.
Either October 25th or the 29th of November.
Right.
I think we...
A workshop as opposed to a first just reading.
Two things. Our consideration was that you would want to have a workshop where you would have plenty of time. The only thing on the agenda, folks can come speak, you can discuss without having other agenda items. And secondly, that our anticipation was that clusters would identify working teams, a working committee, a working group, all 100% representative of the cluster. And that we would present data in a large, I could see 200 people coming to it. I remember 3 years ago we went out to all the budget workshops, and I did a lot of those, and we had hundreds of people at some of the meetings. That is a great forum to identify broad concepts, not a great forum for getting down to the nitty-gritty. So our thinking was we would meet in large group, and then perhaps the group itself, the cluster, either using its own preference, could identify a working team to work with us in a small group, and then accordion back to the larger group. So we would have several of the large groups, but a number of small working groups where we would really get down to nitty-gritty. And that would create a greater representation than just appointing one or two people to a committee, which then becomes almost like a mini cluster because we'd have 40 people at the committee.
So your plan would include a workshop?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, and I can support that. The appointments are hard because each year in the past we have appointed people and they spend a lot of time working, and then they get really frustrated when we say we don't want to do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, good. I think we are done with this item. Oh, we've got a speaker. No, okay, so we're on to non-agenda items. So we got Becky Breedlove and
I know you saved the best for last. Sorry.
And Joe Allen Archer.
I promise that I won't make a practice of exercising my right to speak at the end of the board meetings. I'll try to just do that at the beginning from now on. But I wanted to, first of all, publicly thank the UT for their wonderful article. And as you board members were talking at the beginning of the meeting and talking about the need to hear more good stories, I really appreciate the fact that a committee was convened recently and people were talked to, including teachers, about how do we get those stories out, and I appreciated seeing that article today and look forward to more. Secondly, I feel pleased when I hear all the exciting things that are happening at schools. I guess a lot of it as a result of Prop S, but I also feel jealous and I also feel angry because it has been my experience at Crawford that we always get moved down the list. And when I remember a time when Mrs. Nakamura wanted air conditioning at a school, that got slipped up here. That means we got moved down here. So when we talk about the air conditioning issues, when we talk about the $1.1 million for the wonderful program that could come to Kearney, and those are things that kids want to go to. And when you have a school that doesn't have air conditioning, that doesn't have its first turf field, much less its second turf field, doesn't have lights, it's harder to keep the enrollment up, even though you see good things happening. And it's just really kind of, you feel like this Cinderella who forgot to find the prince of the ball when you hear about all those good things all the time. Not that you shouldn't continue to share them. The third thing I just wanted to mention has to go back to the school closure issue. And even though people are excited about the fact that this is going to energize clusters, I'm a little dismayed because I feel like in my cluster we were seeing some things come together and happening, and I kind of feel like some of that is going to get sidelined. I know that this is important work. I know it's necessary work, but I hope we have the energy and the commitment to continue to work beyond this difficult decision. And as far as subsidizing, last night when we talked about subsidizing, I didn't see any socialists jumping up or people opening their pocketbooks. So it's a pretty foreign concept to think that a school who already feels very financially strapped and doesn't have a culture of sharing their money with another school is going to jump forward and say, hey, yeah, we'll save you. Let's just give up our program so that you can be successful. Not that people won't be creative, but I don't think I'd be betting too much on that as a real big possible solution. Thank you again.
Okay. And if you had talked about the transportation and the blackout at the beginning, I wouldn't be here and keeping everybody up. But I'm speaking tonight as a grandmother, and I don't know if you have an emergency program for blackouts and transportation for special ed busing, but my grandson was over an hour late. And when they called, they were told that they couldn't talk to the bus drivers. Now, I know every bus driver has a radio. So did that mean the base command is not set up with a generator? I would hope there is an emergency plan because blackouts could happen in different parts of the city. Anything could happen. And I want to know as a grandparent that wherever the main transportation part is, they can get a hold of the bus drivers. And I want to know the bus driver can get a hold of the main transportation or the police department, no matter what our electricity situation is. So I'd really like to know if there is a plan for emergency procedures in busing when there's a blackout and why they could not contact the bus drivers when I know the bus driver has my grandson's parents' cell phones to tell them. Now, granted he couldn't get, and maybe the only reason was because the traffic was bad and that's why he was late, but not much has been said about it.
Mr. Stover or Superintendent, could you very briefly comment on the question that Joellen is asking?
Yeah, we do have generators at transportation. They were active. The transportation, the traffic was horrendous at that time. That is why buses were late. And to my knowledge, I'll have to confirm for sure, but to my knowledge, there was constant contact with the bus drivers through that generated operated radio.
Okay, well, there weren't with the parents, so I would say you need a generator for computer systems. Since I work with the computer systems, I know when the power goes down, it goes down. But I print a lot of things to have hard copies of it. And if you had to pay someone, even a classified employee that you cut, to be able to reach the parents to give them a feeling of safety when they know there's no electricity and darkness is coming, I think it needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to add that we were operating off of two-way radios because of the either inconsistency or total shutdown of cell phones. Yeah. Some landlines were working. And the police, I was in the dispatcher, we were checking off after-school program one by one to make sure that the kids were covered with an adult or being picked up by a parent. And there was a lot of late pickups just because of the parking area. Yeah. But, we'll continue to review how we make contact with very limited or constrained resources or communication systems.
Okay. Thank you. We are adjourned back to the closed session.